This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by.
Good morning, everyone. Can I welcome members, officers and the public to today's meeting of the Transport Committee. Our main item of business today is a discussion on autonomous passenger vehicles in London. Please can you make sure that your electronic devices are switched off or onto silent mode? Can I also ask guests and members to position their microphones so that you can be heard clearly? And can I start by asking our clerk, Hannah Barlow, if any apologies have been received?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Assembly Member Moema, and Assembly Members Bakari and Prince are attending online.
Thank you very much. And just double check. Yes, I can spot them online. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out at item 2? And thank you. And ask if members have any other interests to declare. No? Excellent. Can I ask the committee to note the ongoing actions arising from previous meetings and the additional correspondence received? Thank you. So we now move on to our main item of business, a discussion on autonomous passenger vehicles in London. And I would like to welcome to the Chamber our first panel of guests. So we have Professor Siddhartha Kastgir, Head of Safe Autonomy at Warwick Manufacturers Group, University of Warwick. We have Rebecca Posner, who is the Director of Inclusive Research at the Research Institute for Disabled Consumers. We have Tom Bogdanovich, who is the Senior Policy Officer at the London Cycling Campaign, and Navi Sunia, who is the Senior Engagement Officer for London at Transport for All. So, moving to our first load of questions, where we're looking at the impact on Londoners walking, wheeling, cycling or using public transport. So I'm going to start with a question for Tom and Siddhartha, and then my second question will be for Navi and Rebecca. So Tom and Siddhartha, in your view, what, if anything, can autonomous passenger vehicles bring to our city? And what are the safety implications for people walking, wheeling and cycling? So, Siddhartha, would you like to start?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor to be here. And thank you for the question also. Firstly, I think it's very important to highlight the fact that autonomous vehicles, when they come to London, will be part of the wider traffic network. So it won't be a separation between autonomous vehicles and the wider traffic. And any successful deployment of autonomous vehicles will be a heterogeneous in a heterogeneous traffic environment. So that's the first thing I wanted to make it very clear. In terms of benefits, when it comes to working with bicyclists and pedestrians and other vulnerable road users, if we allow autonomous vehicles as per the United Nations regulation that is actually being voted today in Geneva, this has already been taken care of. So in terms of autonomous vehicles that are safe to deploy, they absolutely have to be able to safely navigate bicyclists and other vulnerable road users. So if and when the vehicles come on road, the Vehicle Certification Agency in the UK will be approving them as part of the safety aspect of the vehicles. And as part of that approval, they would be approved to this United Nations regulation. And as a consequence of that, it is already a given that they would be both the vehicle and the other road users around it should be safe. So that is the first thing I wanted to mention. However, there is a big aspect when you're trying to regulate or introduce a new technology. It's like going into the unknown. So we can only regulate and make things safe on things that we know of or we can predict will happen. And so there's a big part of the United Nations regulation which is about learning from deployment itself. So there's a concept within the United Nations regulation which is called as in-service monitoring and reporting, which is a requirement for all developers who are bringing these vehicles into any city in the UK or across the world to be able to report as per the agreed data requirements at the United Nations. And these data requirements have been agreed by regulators, by industry, and different advocacy bodies. So all that together gives me a lot of confidence in the fact that when they come to London, both the vehicles would be safe, but also more importantly, the other vulnerable road users around the vehicles and other traffic participants will also be safe, because it's a combination of approving what we already know of and also learning from the deployments at the same time. Lastly, the third point I want to mention, the autonomous passenger service scheme that has been introduced, which is what we're talking about, is also a trial aspect, because what the full regulation in the UK would not be ready until 2027. So this trial perspective is also very important to understand what are the nuances of bringing this technology in the UK. A lot has been said previously that this technology is in the States, it's in China, but UK is different, London is different. But the whole purpose of this trial process of APS is actually to learn the nuances of London. Thank you.
Okay, I think so. So you're saying that the UN regulations that are being agreed today have got an element about learning about the autonomous vehicle technology, so quite apart from autonomous passenger vehicle services. But are there any safeguards in the UN regulations that are being agreed for the convenience of people walking and cycling on city streets? Because obviously, you know, we've all heard the things like jaywalking, which have been concepts introduced in America to kind of push pedestrians out of our streets and people riding bikes. So are there any protections in those UN regulations for that kind of the convenience of people using our streets, being able to cross the road where they want to cross the road, and being able to get around?
Thank you so much for that question. I would say partially yes, but the other part that is not covered by the UN regulation is covered by the UK setup that we have. In the UK, we have a two-step process. One is the approval process, which is the approval against the UN regulation. So that's the first step that happens, and the UN regulation has concepts of following the traffic rules and not creating unnecessary congestion and nuisance. So that's partly covered by the UN regulation. However, in the UK, we have this concept of authorization, which is the next step after the vehicle has been approved to be safe and has been deemed to be safe. And this concept of authorization is focused on ensuring that at the local level where this is going to be deployed, be it London or any other city in the UK, it is ensuring that the other traffic users are also are not penalized, or there's no inconvenience for them, because that could lead to unnecessary traffic nuisance also. So that is the two-step process that we have in the UK, allows us to leverage what we already there in the UN regulation in terms of following the traffic rules, but that is only part of this solution. And the second aspect of authorization, we're working with local authorities, is a big part of it, and understanding the nuances of local authorities, where people in London might behave very differently to people in Coventry in terms of the demography of the vulnerable road users and so on and so forth. So this second step of authorization gives us the levers in the UK to ensure that when we allow somebody in the UK, it is ensuring that everybody is treated in an equitable manner.
Okay, thank you. That's useful extra information to us. Tom, would you like to answer the original question?
Yes, it's something obviously that we're very interested in from the perspective of cyclists who are vulnerable road users. And we were pleased to hear some of the discussion last week at the Transport Committee, which talked about...
Is your mic on?
Sorry.
Do you want to start again?
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Is that better? Great. Yeah, I'm very pleased to answer that question. It's something that we've been covering. There's even an article in our magazine for the benefit of our members, all about AVs. And we were pleased to hear the Transport Committee last week talking about some of the other uses of AVs, not just robo-taxis, which are already here in London, but apparently there are shuttle buses in Oslo, and I understand from the MOVE conference last week that there are shuttle buses in Stavanger, and this is something that is also a potential for outer London in particular. So for obvious reasons, we're very concentrated on safety. We don't want these vehicles to endanger active travel users any more than is necessary. I've been on a trip in a vehicle. It was frankly boring. It was good to see that it was boring and nobody got injured. We even had an occasion where the vehicle permitted someone to sort of move into the traffic even though they did not have priority. So I was surprised to see that. So these vehicles appear to have some sort of learning capacity, and that's good to hear. We're not aware of any collisions as such. We have heard reports of 2 close encounters, one I think reported in the press by New Scientist journalists where the vehicle came to a sudden stop at a roundabout. Another occasion where a cyclist coming around the corner encountered a vehicle doing a U-turn and was rather surprised that it would do it at a corner. So these things do have to be learned, and I think as Siddhartha was saying, data is vital. That data needs to be fed to the authorities, and there should be learning both for the people providing the vehicles, the operators, but also for the authorities to be able to minimize dangers to us all on the roads. Another thing which is of key importance to us is responsibility, and we've just heard about the various steps in Britain. As I understand it, none of the vehicles that are out on the road now, whether Wave, Waymo or Baidu, have that authorization. So they are not subject to what is known as strict liability. So you would have to effectively prove that the vehicle was at fault if there were a collision. Going forward, it's interesting to us exactly what the terms will be. You know, if it's strict liability, then you don't actually have to prove as a vulnerable road user that the vehicle was or wasn't at fault. You are simply paid out, basically, and it's up to the vehicle operator to prove that you were at fault if that were the case. But if there's a user in charge, it seems a little unclear from what we've been reading. We're also very concerned that this should not be an addition to the motor traffic on our roads. I mean, the Mayor has a very clear target of increasing the number of trips by public transport, walking and cycling from 64% to 80%, as you know, by 2041. And it would be great if that were to be realized. Cycling is already contributing to that. Last year, I think cycling increased by around 12%. It would be great if all active modes were to contribute. And if these cars are to replace unnecessary vehicle journeys or some vehicle journeys, then that would be a step forward. If, on the other hand, they simply add an additional fleet of vehicles to increase congestion, then we will be moving a step backwards. So, you know, those of us who have used Zip cars, for example, sadly gone, were able to not run vehicles because we could use a shared vehicle. So if these were effectively shared vehicles or shared shuttle buses in outer London, for example, that would help us reduce the quantity of traffic. On the other hand, if it increases the volume of traffic, and that would be perhaps a function of pricing and number of vehicles on the roads, then we would be losing.
Thank you. Yes, and if it increases the amount of traffic on the roads, we're going to see, yes, bus ridership will be worse because the buses will be more held up and congested. Yeah, there's all the, we heard from the taxi and private hire drivers earlier this week about the huge job losses, the potential for those job losses. To 100,000 private hire drivers in London. So that's a big risk. I'm going to move on to Navi and Rebecca. Just how would disabled people be affected by autonomous passenger vehicles as they walk, wheel, or cycle outside i.e. on the street? And are there any groups of people that would be particularly affected, either positively or negatively? So, Navi, do you want to start?
So we don't have the data yet on how AV will work for London because we are still in the trial stage. So we can only anticipate on how it will work. This will also depend on how AVs are deployed across London and where it is deployed across London, and what features the vehicles will have in relation to accessibility as well. So in terms of decision making and policy making for London, there needs to be kind of like leadership in defining how we want AVs to operate in our city and how this fits into our transport strategy. In terms of benefits for disabled people, I would say a lot of many disabled people cannot drive. Some disabled people cannot use public transport at all, so they very often rely on taxis, door-to-door services, and other drivers to get around. So autonomous passenger vehicles would be useful in providing that level of freedom and also independence. Both freedom and independence are very important in terms of just being part of society and being part of the community and being able to live lives and having the same opportunities as non-disabled people do. However, for this to happen, we would need autonomous vehicles to meet different needs of different disabled communities. So there needs to be automatic ramps or lifts, strong securement points for wheelchairs, and other mobility aid users. We need to also have accessible handholds for transferring into vehicles and outside of vehicles. So just a whole host of support around the designs of the physical designs of the vehicles as well, to support boarding and getting off vehicles.
But do you think, because I mean at the moment it's someone who has kind of needs support getting into a vehicle or out of a vehicle, there is a private hire or taxi driver to help them in or out. Do you think that autonomous, so I totally take your point that for some disabled people, being able to use a car that, while they may not be able to drive, but having that freedom to be able to use a car that can drive safely autonomously could be a benefit. But do you think that are you imagining that there is a design process to get a car that is so accessible that anyone with any disability would be able to use it independently? Or do you think that actually the lack of a driver to assist people in and out for some disabled and older people would actually be an issue?
Okay, so I think all modes of transport need to meet the needs of different disabled people and the access that they require to make transport accessible for them. So, so we're talking about audio support, visuals, support for neurodivergent people when traveling, and adequate emergency responses as well. So, so I would say AVs as well as taxis and private hire vehicles and public transport need to meet the access needs for a whole host of disabled people, for the disability community to be able to use them. At the moment, different operators are taking different approaches. This needs to be standardized, and this can not only be standardized by by those who are providing licenses and regulators. So we need to define what set of accessibility criteria autonomous vehicles need to meet to be able to operate in London.
Thank you. That's very clear. And Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So building on that, I think firstly, when we look at the potential benefits and risks, we need to look at this within the context of autonomy as a whole, not just obviously robo-taxis. The potential benefits and risk will vary depending on the use cases that are deployed, both across London but also nationally as well. There is a sort of condition to all of this, which was, as Navi was starting to describe, was the benefits only materialise if not just the vehicles, but the entire service is designed to be inclusive by design. And that's the end-to-end service. So that is every aspect of it, whether that is journey planning, information, booking, ticketing, payment, boarding, alighting, information when using a service, and obviously exiting and responding to any emergencies or accessing support should it be required. It is possible to achieve that, but it requires the conversations happening now have to be about how do we design these services to be inclusive. And that's currently where we've got a little bit of a gap. There's been a big focus on getting the technology to work. So how do we ensure it drives and performs safely? How does it interact safely? There's been less of a focus of conversation around how do we ensure that these vehicles are accessible and inclusive by design, and even less of a conversation when it comes to service design as a whole. There's some of the operators at the moment who are having those conversations. I think Waymo have been very, very open about the level of conversations that they've been having with a diverse group of different potential users. They've done that in the US. They've showed every intent to replicate that in the UK, which is demonstrating that they seem to be embedding that into the process. They can talk much more of that about what they're doing there than I can, but they are definitely demonstrating that they are doing that from a service design. Generally, what we've seen, however, is pockets of excellence as opposed to standardized best practice. So especially in projects that have involved local authorities, where local authorities have been a primary stakeholder in research and development projects or innovation projects, there's been much more of a focus on accessibility and inclusivity. We can look at projects happening in the UK, which are more passenger transport, so public transport, I should say, sorry. Cambridge is a really good example of this as part of the project they've been doing there, where they've conducted engagement with diverse disabled people, accompanied journeys with the vehicle developers, the local authorities, to understand those user requirements and to build those factors into the design of the system. So there are a range of benefits that can come of these vehicles. Navi started to talk about them: improved independence, improved access to transport, improved integration within public transport and to active travel, but only if the services are designed with that in mind. I think, yeah, as I said at the beginning, the key thing to remember is that the benefits will depend on the use case, and the benefits to Londoners will depend on the use cases that are used. So obviously there's a big focus on robo-taxis at the moment for very obvious reasons, but there is also a huge demand from disabled people for automation to be integrated in public transport. There is significant demand from disabled people for automated vehicles as a whole because of the inaccessibility of the current transport system. So there are always going to be risks and benefits to all of those, but from what we're seeing from disabled people, they see these as a real opportunity if they are designed to be inclusive from the start.
Thank you very much. That's very, very clear that we'll only see those any benefit in terms of accessibility if we're thinking about that sort of public purpose of what the technology is going to be used for, and can it make transport systems more accessible to many, many more people who live in London. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move to Neil.
Morning. Probably a question really for Rebecca, Tom and Navi, and it follows on a bit from what you were just talking about, Rebecca, about sort of engagement with the companies developing this technology. What engagement your organisations have had and what the response was that you got from that?
Yeah, I can start. So I can talk both from my current role, but I was previously the head of social and behavioural research within the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Vehicles, so led national programmes of engagement there. So if it's okay, I'll draw on both of those. So what we've seen so far from that engagement is across both roles, there is a real appetite for automated vehicles amongst disabled people. across both urban, suburban and rural areas. Again, the sort of primary intents are about improving access to transport and improving accessibility of transport and improving integration of transport. In terms of the types of engagement that have happened, as I said, it's been more pockets of excellence than standardised best practice. National government have made a commitment in terms of a lot of the research projects that they've been doing to ensure that there is overlay sampling for disabled people within those projects to sort of reflect a lack of engagement in broader research and practices around the design of automated vehicles and systems, and particularly looking at that demand for them. What we're seeing, as I said, is that there is, and from the work that done at RADC, we've also been looking more specifically at addressing that evidence gaps around service design. And so that has been more in the lens of public transport than in robotaxis, but there are a lot of examples that can be taken across the two. And there was a really great piece of work that was carried out by the Transport Research Laboratory that looked at, so TRL, that looked at the driver role and how the driver roles and responsibilities that were not driving related, how they could be replicated across services. And so the work that we've been doing recently with operators, local authorities predominantly, is looking at how we could replace those driver roles, where the driver role cannot be replaced, and therefore where there needs to remain a responsibility for a human in the loop of some sort, whether that is a driver or whether that is another individual that could be remote or on the vehicle itself or readily at hand. So there is a lot of work going on, but it tends to be driven not necessarily by, it's not a standard practice, should I say.
Okay. Yeah, I was interested in as well in, when you'd approach the companies developing the tech. I mean, like, obviously Waymo and Wave are the companies we have here. I'm sure there are other companies as well, the Chinese company whose name currently escapes me, something Baidu.
Baidu?
That's them, yes. Yeah. What their reaction was, whether it was positive, whether it was a sort of indifference, or whether it was, I mean, you talked about pockets of excellence, which sounds a mixed picture.
I think a mixed reaction is the fair. Generally, they've welcomed the information that we've provided. And have been receptive to that, and there's been evidence to show that some of those recommendations have fed into the design of vehicles and services. Some of them are doing their own research with their own advisory groups as well. But I would say if we're looking at operators as a whole, not just singling out those three, but as a whole, the response has been generally interest, but not necessarily adopted recommendations. And I'm generalising that, not picking on anyone individual.
Got it.
I'll be very brief, and I'm very sorry to apologize to interrupt, but I would like to say this.
Thank you, everyone. Just so everyone knows, one of the committee members has gone out to speak to the person who has just been raising points from the audience, because that is someone who we've heard evidence from just last Friday. So and we'll make sure that we get the points that they were wanting to raise. But we're now back in our meeting and we are moving on. Neil, had you finished your questioning?
I barely started.
You'd barely started. Well, let's get back to you.
I mean, I'm not sure whether, Rebecca, you'd finished your answer, but it was basically what was the response, and I think it was a mixed bag. So if I can ask then Tom and Navi, when you asked the companies developing the technology about the issues that we've been reflecting on this morning, how constructive were they in their response?
Well, from the perspective of London Cycling Campaign, the companies, Waymo were quite public. They had a public launch. They invited conversation, so we have been in conversation with them. Wave we've approached, and they have been helpful in having a conversation and showing us the vehicles. So the conversations have started. It's obviously early days. I think we've made it very clear that London is not, Atlanta. It's not a grid. There are complications, and they're aware that they need to be learning from this. But I think that what I've learned partially from the Transport Committee meeting last week and also from the MOVE exhibition is that there are other vehicles in the market, other players in the market, and that conversation is usefully had by London as well. So buses in particular, which could be serving across the community, whether it's people with disabilities, people with bicycles, people who are living in outer London. All of that information isn't necessarily coming in to us and to you, and I think it would be useful to have some of that, particularly because, as the Transport Committee was told last week, it's important that we as a city have some sort of agency in this process. This is not going to be just a reaction to the vehicles arriving and we try and minimize any potential safety issues. It ought to be something that we're proactive about doing and introducing vehicles that serve London and make London a better place from the perspective of transport.
Yep.
And unfortunately, one of the potential tools that we have, apart from regulation authorization, is we don't actually have road pricing at the moment in a more sophisticated manner. We only have congestion charging. So it doesn't allow us to fine-tune these vehicles and vehicles in general, as you might do if you had more sophisticated road pricing. But that's perhaps for another session.
Well, good news, I can say personally, the voice of people in outer London with bicycles is definitely getting heard in this committee since I'm sitting here. One of the issues that I'd seen, specifically in relation to cycling, that had come up in some cities was about curbside pick-up and drop-off, which obviously is quite important from an accessibility point of view. Disabled people obviously don't want to then have a long extra walk from the drop-off point. But where you've got a curbside cycle lane, that obviously creates a conflict. And the view that I'd seen expressed somewhere in America, in some American cities, was that they would just use the cycle lane as the drop-off point. I don't know whether that's an issue that you've picked up here.
It is an obvious issue that has been raised already. And where there is a cycle lane, which is, I should say that there are several varieties of cycle lane in town. There are, for those who aren't familiar, there are advisory lanes which a vehicle may cross, and there are mandatory lanes which a vehicle can't cross. There are lanes which have so-called wands in them. There are lanes which are protected by curbs. These vehicles will encounter all of those vehicles, and including situations where markings may have worn off. What we don't want is a vehicle entering a cycle lane when the cyclist is not aware that it might go in. That is exactly the sort of situation where you might get a collision. So I think the rules need to be very clear, and these vehicles need to understand that they can't just drive straight into a cycle lane and potentially endanger people. I appreciate that there need to be drop-off points, but then you can define drop-off points, and those would be clearly marked and clearly defined. So that's the sort of thing that needs to be thought through before we have these vehicles in full use.
Got it. Thank you very much. Navi.
And I think this will depend on the ability of the vehicles to pick up and understand the geography that they're operating in. Yeah, in terms of engagement, we have had engagement with operators, and very similarly to Tom and Rebecca, the engagement are patchy depending on which operators and we're talking about. So there needs to be a standardized approach. I do agree on this, especially around what safety criteria and what accessibility criteria. The vehicles need to have to be able to operate in London, but also importantly, it should be mandatory that operators are having conversations with disabled people and disabled people's organisations, and we need to be part of trials, of conversations around design. Of improvements when things go wrong. So there needs to be that ongoing conversation with disabled people. And this needs to be set by policymakers and decision makers because operators are taking different approaches. So this needs to be, there needs to be a degree of standardization there. So and also, I think this committee in February, you've released a report around access and inclusion in transport, especially how TfL works and how the Mayor of London, decides on strategy. Disabled people need to be part of co-production. And it's not just a small group of disabled people, but also a broad group of disabled people.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So I now have a question. We've heard some worrying evidence that, rather like live facial recognition cameras, that there is disproportionality in the way that these vehicles recognise people. So, for instance, they are 20% more likely to detect adults than they are to detect children, and they are just over 7.5% more accurate detecting white people compared to black and brown people. So, Siddhartha, do you have any information about the way that the equipment is being calibrated, and are you concerned about disproportionality in the way these vehicles operate?
Thank you. It's a genuine concern for you to have, and there's a lot of conversations around this that are already happening. However, in all our conversations with both developers but also regulators at both local and national as well as international level, this is something that everybody has agreed should not happen. So now the question is, how do we cater to ensuring that this doesn't happen? So again, I'll go back to the United Nations regulation itself. There's a broad consensus that the training and the testing data sets that are being used for these artificial intelligence models that are used for the detection should have a representativeness and a completeness around the actors where they would be experiencing. So for example, if we're deploying these vehicles in London, there should be a level of representativeness in the training data sets that are being used for this particular deployment. So in your example, when you quote 20% in terms of more likely for adults and children, if this is something that we already know of, I absolutely expect the Vehicle Certification Agency to question, as part of the approval process for these developers, show me your training set that you have used for building your models, and how are you claiming that that training and testing data sets is representative of London? This is part of the approval process and should be part of the approval process. If during deployment we uncover that this number still exists in London, then that is, I won't say a cause for concern, but that essentially is something that needs to be fed back to the future approval process. So as of now, I would say this is something that has been recognized and has been taken care of as part of the approval process.
So you're relying on the approval process to take care of that, but for us, and we're thinking about the protection and safety of Londoners, and making recommendations to Transport for London and to the government about the approval process. Presumably that is still something that is unresolved and that needs to be resolved, and they need to have evidence that it has been resolved before giving any approval.
I would say partially yes. The other responsibility that the committee could have and should have is identifying the nuances and specificities of London. So for example, we could absolutely say, we know in London there are this form factor of bicyclists, these form factors of vehicles. The approval process should ensure that this type of vehicle, these form factors are part of the data set. So that should be a conversation from the local authority back to the vehicle certification agency, that if and when you are approving these vehicles, have you considered that for London, these are the specificities?
Well, we obviously don't have approval process that sits with government, and we're trying to get to the bottom of what role TfL has in that process. But we will very much make sure that we ensure that those questions get picked up. And just in terms of, are you aware of the information that that is being requested from the autonomous vehicle, the people who are trying out this technology and developing it? So not the passenger service, but the actual autonomous vehicle technology. Are you aware of what data has to be shared in order to gain safety approvals?
Yes, that is already agreed at the United Nations level, and that the UK has also signed up to it. We played a leading role in the development of that regulation itself. The UK was a co-chair of the United Nations regulation that was building on this. So as part of that regulation, this concept of in-service monitoring and reporting is absolutely focused on the data that needs to be requested by the authorities from the developers and the operators. And they cannot say no because it's part of the regulation.
Okay. Is it possible for you to write to the committee with a list of the data, the specific data sets that are in these UN regulations, so that we're very clear on that, in case we may think of other data that we think should be shared, and it would be useful to understand what is precisely in those UN regulations. I'm now going
Yes,
to
I would be happy to.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to move to Assembly Member Bakari, who is online.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask
Yes, of course. Sorry, Hina, we're coming to you in a moment.
Sorry, Assembly Member Bakari. Sorry, Siddhartha, I was just really perplexed by what you're saying about different forms of cyclists, for example. I mean, presumably, you can get everything from child cyclists through to obviously adults. Why would that be different across different parts of the world?
Thank you so much for that question. So this is a piece of work that we have done at WMG at University of Warwick. The cyclists might look very similar. However, the complexion, the hair color, the clothing of the cyclists could be very different. We have experimental evidence from our collaborators in Canada who have shown to us that depending upon the clothing of the pedestrian, these sensors may or may not detect the pedestrian. So for example, winter clothing could be part of this. As a result of that, as part of the work that we've done in this space, we have worked with the regulators and the developers to ensure we come up with what we call as an classification of all different things that should be part of the training set. So it's not just saying a pedestrian or a child pedestrian. It's also saying, is the pedestrian wearing reflective clothing? Is the pedestrian wearing winter clothing? Is the pedestrian wearing shorts on a warm day today? Is the pedestrian have a different hairstyle? So all those things need to be considered as part of the training data set to ensure that this bias that a lot of people talk about is not part of the detection process.
Right. I mean, apart from how worrying your answer was, so as a cyclist, let's say particularly late at night, I've got lights. I'm also wearing particularly reflective clothing. How would that impact on the sensors?
So there are good sensors and there are not so good sensors. So I absolutely expect the people who are developing robotaxis, that's completely autonomous vehicles, to have taken into consideration the precise situation that you have given. If you, for example, reflective clothing and winter clothing, that should be part of the training and testing data sets. And I know for sure that this is something that the UK approval process will query when anybody comes to the UK, because this is very normal in a city like London.
Well, I'd say it's probably pretty normal most places, but what is also growing, unfortunately, as a driver and cyclist and pedestrian, is I see too many people riding these e-bikes at high speeds in winter clothing and no lights on or reflectors. How would the vehicle pick that up at night time?
So most of these vehicles depend on a multitude of sensors. So it's not just one sensor. So you have LiDARs, you have radars, you have camera systems. So as part of the development process and testing process of these vehicles, they need to ensure that they can detect these different vehicles. So and that is the precise reason why nobody can just rock up to London and say, I'm doing robotaxi tomorrow. That doesn't happen. If somebody says that to anybody, that is a figment of imagination. Everybody needs to understand the nuances of London. And that's why a lot of the developers like Waymo right now and Wave are doing data gathering to understand what are the nuances of London. Is it nighttime reflective clothing, no signaling? Is it nighttime reflective clothing and hand gestures? So those are the nuances that people need to understand as part of the initial data gathering process. That has to happen. If somebody tomorrow comes to London and says, we have solved London sitting in another city outside of the UK, that is a cause for concern.
I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry,
can I just add it on that, because it does raises concerns, especially when it comes to whether those vehicles are able to identify disabled people. Disabled people, we're not homogeneous. There are, a whole range of different types of bodies. There are disabled people of colour. And also those sensors need to be able to identify different types of mobility aids. So it does raise concerns on the ability of sensors to be able to differentiate between being disabled people as people and not. So that's just food for thought.
thank you very much. I think we've taken this point on loud and clear. Sorry, Tom, did you want to add
just
something?
briefly to add to what Bassam and Siddhartha were talking about. I mean, there is a whole range of cargo bikes out there now. There are tandems. There are bikes for riding with children. There are people with disabilities using particular adapted bikes. These are very unusual. So yes, it's very worrying what you say, because if one of those is not detected, what does the vehicle think it is?
Yep. Briefly, yes.
Just to qualify, these are all the challenges that we are aware of and regulators are also aware of. So all the approval process would ensure that these are addressed.
So I think we're all extremely worried that actually that the approval, the confidence that the approval process is going to address all of these outlier situations is actually, I think you can probably detect from the room that we are all extremely concerned about that. Because the consequences are so very, very severe. But I'm going to move us on because we are getting quite tight for time, so we all need to stick to the clock. Hina, online question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm going to be talking about disabled Londoners who are going to be using this new mode of transport. And Navi and Rebecca, you've both been really articulate about some of the pros and cons. I want to look into specifically the aspect of having cars that don't have drivers and the impact that that's going to have. there's been research from guide dogs that 63% of respondents said that they refused access on taxis because of their guide dogs, and even with wheelchair users who've also said they've had trips that have been cancelled because of drivers deciding not to pick them up. So in some of your analysis that you've done, do you feel as if there is some positives that there is a driverless option for disabled people? Navi, do you want to go first?
Yes, I think you're quite right that there are disabled people more broadly encounter a lot of negative experiences when it comes to engaging with drivers. One being not being picked up, lack of assistance, and also just general ableist behavior from drivers. So automatic vehicles would provide that degree of independence, but also a more positive experience, and also just a degree of not feeling like a burden and be judged by others. So we're talking about also buses here and all other modes of public transport, including private hire taxi drivers. So on the other hand, drivers do provide assistance, so are able to help disabled people get on vehicles, on cars, and they are able to also provide guidance to blind and visually impaired people on locating where they need to be at and guiding things. But also when things go wrong, they are able to respond, right? So they have that ability. So any system that and any technology that's being developed need to meet those needs. In terms of just generally access, I think that automatic vehicles, regardless of whether they're introduced or not, there needs to be an approach on transport that drivers and all staff working in public in transport are trained in working with disabled people. So there needs to be a degree of disability awareness training, ongoing disability awareness training led and designed by disabled people. So regardless of AVs or not, there needs to be ongoing work that is done in tackling attitudes, behaviors, and just more broadly across transport, reducing barriers to transport for disabled people.
I'll build on what Navi has said. There are, yes, absolutely, a range of benefits, but it goes back to what I said at the start, only if designed with disabled people from the start. If the systems are designed in isolation from disabled people and not importantly tested with disabled people and a diverse group of disabled people, then those benefits don't materialize. So for instance, if a taxi style vehicle is not wheelchair accessible, it doesn't address the issue of a lack of wheelchair accessible options within the private hire fleet, for instance. So yes, there are a number of benefits that can be achieved, but only if the service in the vehicle is designed with that in mind. And I think particularly we need to consider, at the moment, as I said, the drivers do far more than just driving. And yes, there are a number of barriers associated with that. Navi has talked about some of them in terms of not picking up or cancelling journeys and so on. But they do far more than that in terms of confidence, and sometimes it could be the only point of contact that an individual has on that day. So there are a range of other non-driving related roles that need to be considered before we can say that there are a wealth of benefits. So it goes back to the point I said at the very beginning, which is a lot of those barriers can be removed from access to transport, but only if they are designed entirely with disabled people in mind from the start.
And both of you have talked about this co-production approach that you think is necessary. This is not just in terms of the development of the actual vehicles themselves, but also the policies and also in regulations as well. Do you think there's a place for TfL to assist in that co-production approach if TfL had a lot more say in the way that autonomous vehicles were introduced into London? Do you want to go start with Rebecca? Because I know that this is something you've talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, in short. I think that, in short, yes, absolutely. I think there is a really important role to play for local authorities and the transport bodies, not just in London, but nationally, because at the end of the day, they will be the ones that have a key role to play in the sort of operation and delivery of those services. So yes, absolutely, they should have a far more prominent and should. What we've got with local authorities, and I realise that is not what TfL is, but for the purposes, I will group that together, is there are a couple of organisations who are really, really proactive, who are really leading the way in these conversations and making sure that if automated vehicles are introduced, they're introduced in a way that matches the strategies and the needs and the long-term requirements of the communities that they represent. And where that's been the case, the conversations and the use cases that we're seeing have been far more productive in terms of the developments they've been able to make. So I would absolutely encourage and think that there is a far more prominent role as we start moving into deployment.
And Navi, I mean, in your role with Transport for All, you obviously, see TfL in action. Do you think that TfL are equipped to take that co-production approach that you're pushing for? Do you have concerns that maybe that we need more pushing towards this approach from TfL?
I think so far we haven't been part of any conversations with TfL or the Mayor of London around what autonomous vehicles look like for disabled people. So we've been approached by operators, but not policymakers and decision makers, which raises concerns around how the Mayor of London and TfL are thinking of deploying autonomous vehicles across London. So there needs to be engagement there with disabled people, and there needs to be a push towards co-production. Yes, but also when we mean co-production, we mean transparency, accountability, and just ongoing conversation and communication. So just mutual trust between the disability community and the Mayor of London and TfL.
So can I just push you on that point? Are you saying currently, right now, you don't see the avenues of that trust and accountability and transparency at the moment, and you would like to see more of that?
What I'm saying is that we haven't had any conversation with the Mayor of London and TfL on autonomous vehicles.
Okay, well, there's then more to do then, isn't there, from the Mayor of London and TfL's perspective, to make sure that open, transparent conversations about a co-production approach to autonomous vehicles is needed, and it will be good for us to at least push for that. I also wanted to touch on the impact that the autonomous vehicles will have on buses for disabled people as well. Rebecca, do you think that the implementation of this kind of technology on public transport will have an impact on disabled people more in particular parts of London? We've talked a lot about outer London. Do you think that that kind of technology is something that is needed, particularly on buses for disabled people? And how do we need to progress further to make sure that it's done in a way that does actually work for the disabled community as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think public transport, and particularly public transport as we know it, so larger buses, but also smaller fleets of vehicles, should they be introduced, is one of the primary use cases that people see as a real benefit to automated vehicles, and it's particularly in terms of improving access and integration of transport. So there is a real demand for that. However, at the moment, what we're seeing, and through work that we've done, is there are a lot of aspects of the service that haven't really been considered when we look at sort of automation on public transport. And by that I mean, for instance, how the processes for hailing the vehicle. How do you know where to stop? How do you know that it is the right vehicle? How do you seek that confirmation that you would normally look to the driver to say, like, is this the right vehicle, for instance, and how is that replicated? One of the big barriers that has come up, which was often forgotten about, is where do you pay for the bus? How is that checked? How is that how do you ensure that there's no aspect around skipping fares? Or how is that monitored? How is that controlled? There is also, and this is, I think, something that is really important, is the driver has a role to play in ensuring that, for instance, the wheelchair space is made accessible, is made available for if a wheelchair user was to board the vehicle. We know that there are issues with that, and that is not always the case, but that is one of the roles. And how are those potential conflicts, well, how do we avoid them becoming conflicts? How do we ensure that disabled people know that there will be a space available, whether that is the priority space should they need it, or the wheelchair space should they need it, and that information there? So there is, again, a huge potential for automation on public transport to improve the efficiency of it, to improve the operating hours, for instance, is one of the benefits that's often suggested. But there is a lot more work that needs to be done on the service design aspect for us to make sure that we are actually delivering something that improves accessibility of transport, doesn't consequently end up introducing a range of new barriers because accessibility hasn't been built in from the start.
Thank you. I just wanted last question to Siddhartha, because our last panel did talk about the fact that technology is here, and it could be revolutionary, you know, in terms of places like public transport in outer London areas. But despite the fact that the technology is there, you know, has there been any real efforts to make sure that this is something that it could actually happen in a way that is accessible? I do hear that it wouldn't just be a driverless process with a bus. There would be other people involved on the bus journey, as they have in other parts of the world, like in Paris. So there is like a conductor type person who will assist people. Is that something that you've looked into in terms of where we can go forward as well?
Yeah, thank you so much. One of the roles that I have, in addition to the professor at University of Warwick, is also this director of an organization called Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, PAVE UK. And as part of that, we've actually today published a charter for responsible deployment of automated vehicles in any city. And that charter actually has 6 principles. And one of those 6 principles is actually around accessibility and inclusivity. So the other 5 very quickly is around safety, public benefit, local partnership, transparency and accountability, and responsible integration. So we've got our members who've actually signed up to, and this charter has been co-created with our members, which include Nissan, Uber, and Wave. And we have co-created this charter where they have committed that they fill and will fulfill these principles. So that's the first point I wanted to mention. The other thing, it's very important when it comes to accessibility and inclusivity, you have to consider there are 2 different aspects to it. One is the vehicle design, which is in most cases not the responsibility of the technology developer, because most technology developers tend to just buy a vehicle off the shelf. It could be a Jaguar I-Pace in terms of Waymo, it could be a Marquis in terms of Wave. So they don't actually build that particular vehicle. So making the vehicle accessible is the responsibility of a vehicle manufacturer, or we could also say that, like in a future that it could be a TfL role, or it could be somebody else's role, say a fleet should have X percentage of accessible vehicles. It would be very unreasonable to expect that the entire fleet of any thing could be accessible, because I'll give you an answer for that, because people need choice. So if today you look at call an Uber, you can choose, do I want an electric vehicle, or do I want a XL vehicle, or do I want a small vehicle? So depending upon the requirements, we could absolutely envision a future where we mandate X percentage of a fleet to be fully wheelchair accessible, X percentage of a fleet to be accessible from other aspects. And that's a conversation that needs to, as Rebecca has been mentioning, the conversation needs to have, and that's already starting. The UK government has also set up an accessibility advisory panel specifically for this particular aspect, just to ensure that accessibility is not forgotten. And Rebecca is actually a member of that panel, and there are other organizations like Motability, which is part of that panel.
Thank you very much. I just want to make the point that we do need to make sure that...
Hina, sorry, you've gone way over time.
Yeah,
Hina.
Co-production is not engagement, so that's just the last point on.
Thank you. And I think we're increasingly concerned about the way that accessibility is being considered within the regulatory process. I think we're going to have a lot of comments to make on that, because talking about percentages of accessible vehicles, we need accessible services in a city like London. We have an ageing population, so that sounds quite worrying. But I think with the points that Rebecca was making earlier about accessible service design, that needs to be designed into any services that anyone is proposing to operate on London's roads. Assemblymember Mahfouz.
Thank you. I'm going to stick with the same theme of impacts on Londoners as passengers. Siddhartha, I'm going to come to you on this particular one. So we recently saw an autonomous vehicle drive into an active crime scene. And so the question to you is, how well equipped are they to deal with emergencies?
Thank you. For that particular example, that actually wasn't an autonomous vehicle. It was manually driven at that particular time. So it could have been any vehicle driving into a crime scene. So I just wanted to make that clarification. It wasn't in autonomous mode at that particular time. So in terms of handling emergencies, this is an active piece of work that both the UK but also internationally, both regulators and developers are doing. There's a big focus on engagement between an interaction of robotaxis or any autonomous vehicle with first responders. There's a piece of work that has been undertaken in the UK, but also there's already international standards that have been, or national standards that have been set up in the US on what is a good interaction between an autonomous vehicle and a first responder. So that's partly been taken care from that perspective. The other important aspect I wanted to highlight was the fact that no fully autonomous vehicle service can exist without, in practical terms, can exist without some level of remote support. Almost everybody who we have spoken to in terms of developers have some level of remote support. It could be a customer call center where you can press a button on the vehicle and you speak to somebody immediately on the other side. So in terms of emergencies handling, there is both handling emergencies with first responders, but also the passengers inside need to have some level of access to talk to somebody, and that's also part of this activity. And it is important that this interaction is standardized. So to that end, I've got the privilege of leading an international standard, ISO 26361, where I'm working, co-leading it with Nissan in Japan on how do we actually, what are the requirements for this interaction between people inside the vehicle with a remote center. So that would be taken care of from that perspective.
Thank you. And it was a question I raised last time in relation to emergency situations. So again, if we look at America as an example, we've seen where vehicles have been sabotaged, attacked, damaged on purpose. You've got a passenger who's sitting in the back seat, just hoping to get to their destination. You've talked about engagement with the emergency services and the push button and so on. What would happen in a scenario like that, and what could we expect if similar things happen here in London?
Thank you. It is important to highlight that situation that you have articulated could happen in any vehicle. It is not a unique situation of an autonomous vehicle.
We do know that these vehicles are targeted by individuals who are looking to take nefarious actions.
Absolutely. And because of that, there is the law that exists in terms of the practicalities of it. And people would be, and these vehicles have lots of sensors. We can identify who's doing what, and the downstream course of action is already taken care of from that. However, it is important to highlight the person inside the vehicle will be in a very uneasy situation when that happens. And that is precisely the reason why we need this remote support aspect, where there is somebody they can speak to, like a 911 or something along those lines, who can identify, oh, help is coming in 1 minute or in 2 minutes. Because in the absence of any information for the passengers inside, it creates a lot of uneasiness. And I think it is mandatory that any service that gets deployed has this functionality to ensure, to give that level of comfort to the passengers for this unfortunate situation.
Rebecca, would you like to come in into what you would like to see from the passenger's point of view?
Yeah, I think that, so on the point around remote assistance, it's often seen as a sort of failure of the technology. I would completely disagree with that. It's actually it's an expectation from a lot of people within the vehicle that that will be maintained for both safety reasons, but also for confidence, for accessibility, and so on. So I think that's a really important thing to remember, that there is a sort of almost demand from the public that that will be maintained. In terms of passenger emergencies or emergencies where there is a person in the vehicle, there is some work that is going on this that is currently being led by the Department for Transport. It's been focused on user requirements in those situations, about simulating a range of different types of emergency situations and the requirements and the processes within that. And I believe the first part of the study is certainly published on the gov.uk website. There are some evidence already of what we know in terms of what needs to be in place. So clear procedures that need to be followed, clear lines of communication, that information needs to be provided in a range of varied formats that match the user preferences, so audio, visual, but also instructional, focusing on, there's a lot that can be learned here that we could take from emergencies or situations that happen on existing public transport and some of the improvements we've seen there around communication. This is not necessarily starting from scratch. There's things that we can learn from existing public transport and how that's managed. I said use of CCTV and microphones is also something that has been, especially for women's safety, is something that has been mentioned quite a few times to demonstrate visibly that there are measures in place to observe, and to obviously that is more about response and deterrence, but I think it is an important aspect to bring in, and direct line of contact and really strong relationships with emergency services is an expected requirement from the public within that as well.
And just sticking with that point, Rebecca, you've opened a really important point there about, you know, what happens within the vehicle, and obviously if there isn't somebody supervising as the driver, if there was violence against women and girls and, you know, happening within the vehicle, or you know, going back to emergency situations where perhaps somebody may be having a seizure or a heart attack or something in the back seat, what would you expect?
So again, I think we can learn from, there's automated public transport that exists. We only need to look at the DLR to see that that's there and how that's. So I think from my perspective there, it's looking at the service aspect, it's looking at the extent to which the service is designed to respond to that. So there is a point around the remote assistance, obviously, that is that the people need to be trained and know how to respond. I think that's often something that is, we look at remote monitoring is something that can respond to the vehicle, but knowing, and Navi mentioned it earlier about disability awareness, knowing that is required as well from individuals who may be providing any kind of assistance whatsoever. So clear protocols in place that have almost sort of simulated that and know how to respond to it, and clear, consistent lines of communications with those within the vehicles would be minimum requirements, I would say. But I would look at, as well, looking at what we can learn from existing public transport, both in the UK but also internationally.
Anybody else wanted to come in on that last point? Yeah, Navi.
Yes, I agree. Clear procedures, accessible communication, and also staff training, but also just to consider protocols for safeguarding passengers, so possibly diversion to safe locations, for example, hospitals. Very much emergency protocols need to be, again, co-produced with disabled people. and problem solving. So when things go wrong, also investigation and also conversations, and this needs to be transparent, shared with regulators and licenses.
Okay, thanks.
Assembly Member Baker, you want to come in?
I did. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Rebecca made about the Douglas Light Railway. There's a member of staff on every single DLR train, and obviously we have staff across the London Transport Network. So I don't see how it can be compared to something that happens in an autonomous vehicle where there isn't any driver, which could be anywhere, nowhere near access to any human beings who may be able to help. So I just think we need to be careful, and I didn't want that to go down without being.
No, absolutely, and I think that's a really important clarification. But I think that's the solution that's been put in place, because that was the requirement for safety. And I think we need to also look at what we've deemed as necessary within. I'm looking at automated vehicles as well as the broadest range, so passenger transport and public transport and other things. So obviously, and I think really important to say, they are not transferable modes of transport, and there are completely different circumstances. But there is a lot of lessons that we can learn from services that are currently operating that are best practice that could be replicated or expected to be introduced into services that are automated without a human driver on board. If we look at some of the trials that happened in Scotland, for instance, they maintained what they called a bus captain within the vehicle that was there for passenger safety and comfort. So, and to answer any questions and so on. So there are different solutions that could be explored should that be a requirement for accessibility and safety reasons.
Sorry, could I just add for robotaxis, for example, there could be an in-person intervention team set up around different points across London. So I wouldn't rule that one out as well.
And just to say that there's a lot of data involved. As I understand it, these vehicles have 360-degree cameras. They have cameras inside. They have audio recording. So all of that data needs to be handled and needs to be shared with the right people at the right time. So that has to be considered.
And there needs to be very careful, it needs to be very clear who has access to what data. And there are also obviously personal safety issues for users of these vehicles because there is so much data that is being collected just by their having potentially used them. I think, from what we've been hearing, my questions about the suitability of an autonomous passenger vehicle service model are just more and more, there are more and more questions that really seriously need to be answered before anyone thinks about regulating any kind of service for autonomous passenger vehicles on our roads. I just wanted to finish with one final question for Tom, just very briefly. Are you concerned that with there's the two things. There's autonomous vehicles operating on London's roads, and then there are autonomous passenger service vehicles operating on London's roads. Either of those could lead to increases or decreases in congestion. But are you concerned that we could see people shifting journeys from public transport or walking and cycling to autonomous passenger vehicle services if they were to exist in London?
Well, they do exist with user in charge already. I think it's pretty much inevitable that they will multiply in numbers. The obvious thing to look at is pricing. I mean, depending on what the prices of the trips are, people will either take them up more or less. I mean, PHVs have been taken up in large numbers, partially because the prices were lower than those of black taxis. So depending on who is setting those prices and the powers behind those companies that are choosing to offer the service, it can vary. And obviously, if the prices were to fall below those of public transport, then people may be inclined to choose exactly that kind of vehicle. And that might multiply those vehicles even for short journeys. On the other hand, if the prices are higher, they might think twice. If, however, we actually create a network of vehicles that are multi-passenger and shared vehicles, then those might be the more attractive ones. So we really have to think hard about how many vehicles are available and what the pricing of those vehicles will be. And we've seen with electric bikes, the shared bikes, that they have risen in popularity, particularly where the fares have been more attractive to the customers, and where the number of bicycles available have increased. So when you're talking about 50,000 bicycles in London, obviously the number of journeys increases, and it makes those vehicles available all around town. So the centre of town is well populated with shared bicycles. If that is happening with shared motor vehicles, then people may choose to use them depending what the price is. So yes, we will have to look very carefully at that.
Thank you. And I think we're going to end there. Thank you all for coming in this morning. And we're now going to take a short break before we resume with the second panel. And you're very welcome to sit in the gallery and listen to the second half of the meeting. where we are discussing autonomous passenger vehicles in London. And I'd like to welcome to the Chamber our second panel of guests. We have Dr. Sarah Gates, who is Vice President of Global Affairs and Assurance at Wave. We have Danny O'Gorman, who is the General Manager, UK and Ireland for Free Now. And we have Ben Lowenstein, is that correct? Head of Policy and Government Affairs, UK and Europe for Waymo. So welcome to all of you. So just an opening question to all three of you. Yes, do you think London needs autonomous passenger vehicles and why? So I don't know who wants to go first. So, Ben.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Look, we believe that Waymo operating in London can play a very important role in helping deliver core components of the Mayor's transport strategy, Vision Zero, the new walking and wheeling action plan, and we believe that we can help create a road network that is fairer, more accessible, and more efficient as well. So, in answer to your question, Chair, my answer is yes.
Okay, we'll be digging into that quite a bit more during the meeting, but we'll keep going. Danny.
Yeah, at Free Now we've been working in London for about 15 years. We currently operate across Black Cab, private hire. We also partner with Human Forest and with Voi on taxi, on scooter and bike. And we also, through Lyft, our company in the US, we also provide the technology for TfL's Santander cycle scheme. So we believe that autonomous vehicles fits really nicely into this fabric of mobility transport within London. So we feel it is absolutely necessary.
You feel it's necessary. I think I'm going to let everyone, let's keep this very brief because otherwise I'll just step on everyone else's toes. Sarah, what would you say in answer to that question?
Yeah, I won't surprise you. We also believe that London will benefit from the introduction of automated vehicles. So I think something hopefully we can all agree on is we still have far too many road deaths and, importantly, seriously injured people every single day. It's around 4 to 5 people lose their lives on the roads today in the UK, and that's still as we sit here in 2026. I think we accept kind of dangers on the road, particularly for vulnerable road users, including cyclists and pedestrians, that we wouldn't accept in other parts of our life. So I think the benefit that automated vehicles will bring to reducing collisions, in addition to other impacts, which I think we'll get onto later in the panel, make this a clear yes.
So that's a yes. I'm actually detecting from all of you for the autonomous technology, but whether that means driverless vehicles, I think is something that we will be digging into throughout this meeting, because obviously there's huge implications for 100,000 private hire drivers. There's huge implications of that for the economy. And there's also all the questions that we're going to be asking you about to do with just how good these vehicles are at actually detecting people, seeing people, and actually operating safely on our streets. But I will move on to Assemblymember Mahfouz.
Thank you, Chair. And Sarah, just coming back to what you were talking about with your introduction, actually, so we'll stick with road safety. And at the moment, wanted to ask you in terms of sort of to what extent the data that you have shows that these vehicles would be safer than the alternative.
Can I please ask you not to interrupt the meeting? If you interrupt the meeting, we will adjourn. We will adjourn if you continue speaking. Adjourn?
Yeah. Well, what are we doing?
So,
Welcome back to the Transport Committee. Welcome back to the Transport Committee. I just want to say that if there is any, this is a meeting held in public. It is not a public meeting, and we cannot take contributions from the gallery. We will adjourn again if there are any further contributions from the gallery.
Thank you. So, Sarah, with your introduction, you talked about road safety. Can you tell us about what data you're collecting at the moment that would evidence that the vehicles that you're putting onto London's roads are safe?
Yeah, so I think I would start by explaining the overall regulatory framework for automated vehicles. I'll try to do it in a short way because it is fairly complex, but I think it's really important to have that basis and understanding when we talk about kind of meeting safety thresholds. I think it's fair to say that a lot of us today don't think too deeply about how normal vehicles are regulated, and often then there's a little bit of an explainer to do that helps us then understand what automated vehicles would be assessed by from a regulatory perspective, which I think gives people a lot of reassurance around the safety thresholds that these vehicles will have to meet. So in the UK, we are signatory to the UNECE. I think Siddhartha discussed this in the previous panel. All road vehicles today have to be approved to a certain standard. And I think that's really important to understand. They don't just turn up in the UK and they can't just operate with new systems without being thoroughly assessed by vehicle type approval authorities, which are essentially vehicle regulators. So the UK, as a signatory to the UNECE, has been deeply involved in the type approval framework for automated vehicles. So that includes the fully driverless vehicles that are, of rightly most focus of most of these debates. And in order to deploy those vehicles in the UK, you will have to meet a standard of a careful and competent driver. So our belief at WAVE is that the vehicles will go far beyond a careful and competent driver. And that is, easiest way to think about that is over 88% of accidents today, a contributing factor in the incident is usually distraction, or being under the influence, tiredness, emotion. And these vehicles will never have those things. They will never suffer from having these kinds of emotions that then contribute to incidents on the road. So I think as a broad basis, I would love if we could go away from today understanding that these vehicles won't just turn up in the UK. They will have to go through incredibly rigorous testing. And that's both on-road testing and simulated testing. So billions of hours of data go into these vehicles before they're allowed to be at that kind of level 4 fully driverless operation. Wave's vehicles today have an operator at the wheel, so actually a PHV licensed driver will be operating our vehicles, and they will be implemented alongside other human-operated vehicles on the Uber network. So I just want to reassure that we're taking a sort of a phased approach to introducing this technology, and we are constantly collecting information about the behaviour of the vehicles. And that's not only in the UK. Our vehicles currently have operated across 70 countries and 500 cities. And we have a safety record to date, which means I can say that we've never had any serious incident in the UK, and we've been operating here since 2018.
And in terms of that safety data that you collect, who do you share that with?
Yeah, so I'll go back to the UN type approval framework again, and I should say that is supported by the Automated Vehicles Act 2024 in the UK. So there are sort of 2 layers of legislation that we need to comply with. And through both of those mechanisms, we have very stringent data collection and sharing requirements. So one of the things that we will be present in all level 4 vehicles is a data storage device, which is easiest way to think about it is a little bit like a black box that you would have on an airplane. But the reality is it collects a lot of very detailed information about the driving behavior and telemetry from the vehicle, which allows us to tell what happens after an incident. We can also be requested to share that information, even if there is no, say, more serious incident, with the regulator, so that they can essentially monitor the behaviour of fleets when they're in operation.
And super quickly before... So super quickly before I move on to Waymo next, in terms of you're talking about having the black box in place, so that would be. So would that also be collecting things like near misses, so where it's avoided collision?
Yeah, so the vehicles are literally 360 covered in sensors, right? So their ability to...
Sorry, I've explained already that this, I have explained already this is a meeting held in public, but not a public meeting. Please do not interrupt the meeting, otherwise we'll have to adjourn. Welcome back to the meeting. I'm going to explain one more time exactly how this meeting works. This is a meeting that is held in public. on this side of the table, there are the Assembly members, and we have heard from private hire drivers and representatives of the taxi trade last week, and we have questions that we are wanting to put to our invited guests on the other side of the chamber. Every time there is disruption in the gallery, we are taking out time that we could be using to be pushing the very serious and very worrying points that were made to us last Friday. So I'm just appealing to everyone in the public gallery, let us do our job of scrutinising the people who have come in front of us. And we will, at that point, after the meeting, we can take up any further points that you may have. But if you disrupt the meeting, we will just waste all the time when we have a lot of very serious questions that we need to put to the invited guests. Assembly Member Mapuse.
Right, okay. So in terms of road safety technology, I've worked with organisations over the years to implement that, and I think what has been very impressive is the live technology, where you can see obviously where vehicles are at, live information. You talked, Sarah, about the black box, so that's a scenario where something has already happened or near misses. You could have that information post the incident. What sort of information do you get as the vehicles are going around London? Obviously, I mean, your model, you'd have a driver sitting behind the wheel, well, an individual sitting behind the wheel anyway at that particular point. But how do you would have that data presumably, and who would you be sharing that with?
Yeah, so we have information about how the vehicle is operating. So, for example, if we needed to look into some kind of trigger event, which could be harsh braking, harsh acceleration, or kind of, I don't know, one of the vehicles is scraped or kind of involved in a minor incident, which is typically your most common kind of occurrence in London, right? That you'll probably have scraped by another vehicle or cyclist or that kind of thing. We have the ability to look into, exactly what happened at the time, and I think I could say, from the level of information that we get from a vehicle, we would have a lot more information to actually look into a near miss or an incident than you would get from a traditional vehicle. We would be expected to share that with regulators, and that's true all around the world. So there will be different kind of specific regulatory requirements depending on where we're operating. But we've already discussed with TfL that we would give them information related to an incident, and when we are, like most providers will be operating under the new passenger framework that DfT have designed, there are very specific reporting requirements in the event of an incident. So yeah, I can just reassure you that there are pretty stringent requirements on developers and operators to share information if there is anything, anything's happened, but also if anything's being perceived to have happened, because there could be something that happens on the road that, isn't necessarily at the fault of the vehicle, but some kind of like incident that people want to look into. We have all of that information, and we would be very open to sharing it with regulators where needed.
Thank you. Ben, your model with Waymo is different to Wave, so you are looking to put these vehicles onto the roads without somebody sitting behind the passenger wheel. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. Similar to the service in the United States.
Yeah. So in the United States, obviously, very different roads to what we have here. Grid systems in most cities, very open, wide roads. In London, I've driven from in many parts of the world, and from very difficult places to perhaps London and elsewhere. But there are quite unique circumstances of sort of driving in London compared to particularly the areas that you operate at the moment. How can you ensure that the safety on our streets is taken into account?
Yeah, so I think there are a few elements to this. I'd like to also back up what Sarah mentioned about the regulations. So we cannot operate a driverless vehicle or a driverless service until we have received the relevant permission from the DfT to do so. I should also note, Siddhartha talked this morning about the applicability of the United Nations regulation. Here in the UK, we have a commercial piloting regime that is in place right now, and we will have the full suite of regulation next year. Under the commercial piloting regime, the UK has basically taken the full draft UN regulation and put it into the requirements here. So in some senses, this is a piloting regime, but at the same time, this is arguably the most stringent set of requirements that any operator has to go through. Now, under those requirements, it is the permission that we are given is based on the operational area that we intend to serve and the operating conditions. So basically, we need to satisfy the regulators before we can do anything. I think, though, in general, you're asking more about the applicability of the experience that we have in international markets. I would say it's not only the more than 200 million miles we've driven on public roads in the United States. We've also been testing in Tokyo for more than a year with incredibly dense, narrow roads, lots of pedestrians, diverse communities. And that is also helping put us in good stead for London. But this is also the point of us testing here and doing so in a thoughtful, considerate manner. We want to test in different parts of the city. We want to learn, we want to gather the data and to learn what the delta is between that which we know from our 200 million miles of autonomous driving in the US and what is happening here.
So I think your model relies on mapping the London streets. So when you say about the confine, you'll operate within the confines of what's been approved because you've mapped these streets that they can drive in and other conditions that would be required. So what other conditions are you referring to there that would have to be applicable before your vehicle could go on the road?
Yeah, so this matter is dealt with in regulation. This is the concept of an operational design domain, or an ODD. And this is the full set of parameters under which you are allowed to operate. So that could be weather, geography, time of day, etc.
And we have seen, let's be honest, we've seen images on our screens, documentaries that have shown vehicles in the States which have been in killed, serious, injured scenarios with, I think it was a cyclist in one of the ones I'd seen where it was a cyclist crossing the road. The vehicle didn't know whether it was a pedestrian or a cyclist, so decided to still go through the individual. Obviously, there was a passenger who clearly wasn't. There was a driver behind the wheel that clearly should have been paying more attention to the road as well. But how can we, what assurance could you give Londoners that you wouldn't have similar sorts of situations, particularly at night time, and particularly given the evidence that we just got in the previous panel?
Yeah, thank you for raising that. I'd love to discuss that particular incident more with you because I'm not familiar with it. You say there was a driver in the front seat of the vehicle. So under the trial and code of practice here, the driver is responsible for exercising control of the vehicle. Look, when it comes to reassuring Londoners, again, the regulations here that are being put in place are world class, and this is not something that has happened overnight. The Law Commission studied international best practice on this for 4 years. We then had the Automated Vehicles Act, which was subject to extensive consultation, which TfL was also involved in throughout this entire process. There was then further consultation, and now we're at the point of just being able to operate a commercial pilot. So the other thing that I would say to reassure people here is that the UK has taken a globally leading role in the development of this framework.
No, and it's incredibly positive, and I think what the purpose of this committee is to make sure that we are globally leading in terms of the regulations and licensing of this, if it is to go ahead and so on. In relation to the evidence that we heard earlier, though, in terms of sort of differentiating between different types of cyclists, pedestrians, and so on and so forth, it was quite concerning, to be quite frank, what we heard. How could you give us some assurances as to as a cyclist myself, a pedestrian, yes. I've got children, I don't have to worry about these vehicles if they come onto our streets?
Yeah, well, I thank you for raising that point, because improving the safety of roads in general for people to cycle and walk is obviously a core part of the MTS here in London. And we also have the data from our deployments in the US to show that we are making roads safer for people to cycle and walk in. You can view these at waymo.com/safety. You can also read about our methodology. I've heard...
Sure, sorry, I'm just going to pause you for a second, Ben, because I think when we looked at the data, and I think it's very positive improvement in the States. Going back to the first point I made, I think the roads in the States are very different to the roads here, and they are far more dangerous because they don't have some of the cultural differences that we have here, and the safety impact that TfL and a number of boroughs have already made across the city over very many years. So just to sort of focus on the London context.
So the roads are different, but the fundamentals are the same. right? The vehicles don't get distracted. The vehicles don't get tired. We have four different types of sensor on the vehicle, right? So we have LiDAR, which is basically a laser, radar, camera, and microphones for detecting emergency vehicles. And it's the combination of all of those sensors that gives us a 360-degree view of the world around us. Now, we're not just looking at what is there, we are predicting the next movements based on speed, based on what we've seen before. And this is really fundamental to the design of the Waymo service. In terms of reassuring Londoners, the data that we have produced has been peer-reviewed. It's been independently verified by groups like Swiss Re, one of the world's largest reinsurers, that have also come to the same conclusion, which is that we are improving road safety. If you have Waymo in your community, we're improving road safety. To give you a really mundane example, we're programmed to follow the speed limit. And if we follow the speed limit, the vehicle behind us will follow the speed limit. And so that's why, the mayor of Phoenix has talked about the fact that we have a calming influence on traffic in her city.
I mean, one of the things I hear from drivers who drive at the 20 miles per hour or even 30 miles per hour roads is that you've got vehicles who try and dangerously overtake and so on, actually. So sometimes you can frustrate in terms of when you're a compliant driver, unfortunately. Sort of my key takeaway in terms of before I started driving, my mum always said, I can trust you to be a good driver. You've just got to watch out for all the other bad drivers out there. So how do these vehicles deal with that scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And I think there's so much focus on scenarios where the automated vehicle is the initiator of an accident. But really, a lot of the impact that we are making in the community is about being a better responder to bad human driving. We did a study on this in 2021, which looked at tragic fatal crashes involving human drivers in Arizona in the 8 years before, or the 9 years before we began testing there. The police gave us lots of data about those events, and we looked at that, and we took the data, ran it into our simulators, had groups independently verify what we were doing, and the results were incredible. We found that if we were the initiator of the accident, we would have avoided 100% of them. If we were the responder to the accident, we would have completely avoided 82%. We would have mitigated the severity of a further 10%, but then you might be wondering, well, where's the remaining 8%? In that remaining 8% of scenarios, the vehicle was stood completely still and was either T-boned or rear-ended by another car. And this is actually one of the key learnings that we found. Context is absolutely key. And when we look at these incidents involving automated vehicles, it's really important to ask ourselves, what are the broader circumstances? Just because somebody takes a picture, it doesn't necessarily give you the full context. And to Sarah's point earlier, the advantage of having an automated vehicle for insurance claims, for building public acceptance, is that we will have that information at our disposal.
Sarah, it looked like you wanted to come back in on this, but I just wanted to ask as well, one of the concerns that's been raised is almost like the other end of the spectrum, that you've got the point that these cars are taught to be overly cautious, and so on London's roads, if you don't take a certain level of risk, you'll never get anywhere in London, and then therefore you'll be causing other challenges.
Well, we've been operating on London streets since 2018, so if we weren't getting, I guess, the right balance between being cautious and being assertive, we wouldn't have got anywhere in that time. And we've obviously managed to train the vehicles to sort of take the right approach. And, also people haven't, no kind of shade to my PR team, but people sort of haven't really noticed that we've been here since 2018. And I think, we're a young company in the UK, and we've obviously scaled to really good maturity at this level. But we haven't been causing upset because people haven't really noticed that we've been there, and we have been able to get around. And I think Ben mentioned earlier, like the amount of work that has gone into thinking about these things on these vehicles. Like it started with the UK government back in, and I think even pre-2015, when the Law Commission started their study into the new legal framework, which looked at new approaches to liability. And the reason the UK government has invested so much time into looking into the regulatory framework is because the broader economic benefits and creation of jobs that they see from this industry, and that's all along.
Sorry, we're very clear. We are coming with more questions. So please don't interrupt, okay? If you interrupt again, we'll clear the gallery.
Yeah, sorry, go for it. Yeah. Sorry, I was going to wrap up anyway. So, Sarah, if there was anything else you wanted to add to what you were saying.
Broader point was the amount of investment that has gone into this to date, and that's not just in the UK, it's all around the world, is a reflection of the amount of confidence that the UK government has in this technology, adding societal value, but also adding economic value. And I think when we talk about jobs, that I'll just say there will not be 100,000 PHV driver jobs lost this year. Like that's not happening.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that in a moment if the audience allows us to get to that point. So thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you. Neil.
Hello. Obviously, a lot of the regulation for this that we've talked about happens nationally or even internationally. What engagement have you had with Transport for London, obviously, as the transport authority here in the city? Perhaps, Ben, if you can start.
Look, we've had a long-standing relationship with local authorities around the world for a long time, including TfL. They've had a curiosity about what AVs are. You know, we've provided education sessions for them and other regulators for several years. You know, we are in the process of discussing with them what a service would look like in London. But as I understand from TfL, they are about to set out additional guidance on what they expect of operators, and we look forward to receiving that because it's going to be really helpful as we look to, you know, design a service that fits London. And I guess just one final point to make on this, you know, this is not just about putting American technology on British roads. This is about designing a service that works for this city and complements that which is already here.
Thanks. Danny.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this is something where at Free Now we've had a really long-standing relationship with TfL. We've worked with them on the kind of black cab space since 2011, and on private hire more laterally. We have a operator license, which is one of the most strenuous operator licenses to get anywhere in the world. So we work with TfL very closely on that. I think this is quite an interesting rollout in terms of other kind of previous new technology. If you take e-bikes and scooters, for example, it's been controlled at a very local level, whereas the regulatory framework for this is set as a national level. However, each local authority, in this case TfL, has a very strong input in what's happening. So we've been speaking to TfL on this topic in dedicated sessions since we've started working on it. And when we submit our application for this, TfL, as the local licensing body, have a veto right. So there shouldn't be any new news to TfL in that. So everything needs to be teased and kind of gone through, and everything from the safety to the regulatory side needs to be sorted out before we get to the application phase. Otherwise, TfL won't be on board, and therefore we won't be able to go ahead with our plans.
Got it. Sarah?
Yeah, so we've has been kind of engaging with TfL ourselves. So we're a British developer. We've, again, been in London since 2018, and we're building technology that can scale anywhere. But of course, as our HQ location and the place that we've kind of, let's call it like, trained the AI, we've obviously always been in kind of discussions with TfL, predominantly about kind of the future-facing kind of impacts and how we think about safety assurance of the technology. I would say, though, much stronger relationship would be with our operator. So we're deploying on Uber this year, and of course, Uber and TfL, as you'd expect, have a long-standing and deep relationship. So of course, they're going to be continuing those conversations as it relates to bringing AVs onto the network.
Okay, and obviously, this conversation is centred on robo-taxis or, you know, cars effectively. But obviously TfL operate other kinds of vehicles, and an AI driver could presumably operate other kinds of vehicles. So have you had conversations with TfL about, let's say, buses, for example? Or is that something that you're thinking about or would think about? Or pods, or whatever word we use for a larger vehicle? Is that a no?
I think for me that's a no, but I want to kind of clarify. There's a bit of misnomer around the word robo-taxi, particularly in the UK. Taxi is a very kind of dedicated type of transport in the UK. In London, it means passing the knowledge. It's a very specific vehicle. So in London, these won't be taxis. They won't be able to use bus lanes. They won't be able to use the same kind of features that a taxi has. But for us at Free Now, we're not considering anything on a kind of larger transport scale.
I think Robo PHV might not.
Doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? No.
I can jump in there around kind of, I guess, the longer term trajectory for the industry. So we developed the AI that can drive a vehicle, and we are focused on integrating into both consumer vehicles. So we have contracts for level 2 driver assistance products, but we also are focused on obviously level 4, so eventually fully driverless services. We're building AI that can be integrated into any vehicle type. And that means sort of any manufacturer, but also any type of car or van or lorry. We just so happen to be focusing on passenger vehicles because honestly, practically, that's where we're seeing more demand. And I think, you all came round to the Wave HQ a couple of weeks ago. The space constraints of just trying to develop on larger vehicles is challenging when you're growing a company in London. But we absolutely hope to deploy into more vehicle types as we test, prove out the technology. And that's why for us, these trials are really important. So we actually want to be able to demonstrate how advanced the technology is now and the benefits it can have for people using our roads, particularly vulnerable road users, I think. So speaking as someone who cycles everywhere in London, one of my biggest points of excitement for this technology is actually being surrounded by some vehicles that which I know will kind of be operating in such a way where they will give me the appropriate amount of distance that I'm supposed to have. I won't get angry if they feel like I'm cycling in the wrong place. And so as we see this proven out in passenger vehicles, we should absolutely be excited about the opportunity to see this integrated across all kinds of road transport. And I think that's where we can see huge benefits in safety gains with larger vehicles, and also kind of more interesting new roles. So, for example, what might we want to do with public transport and repurposing people's current roles, which might allow them to service accessibility needs.
Sorry, if we have interruptions from the gallery, we will have to stop the meeting. Please let us get on with the questions.
So in a sense then, the long-term vision that you have is not, as I say, the focus currently is on private hire vehicles, and we've heard from some today, but actually long-term what you're thinking is that if you're on the road, in effect, the private cars, private hire vehicles, taxis, using the correct definition of that word, big red buses, Amazon delivery vans, all of them would be driven by an AI driver, you think?
Yes, that's possible. So if we see acceptance of the technology, ultimately, again, that's super important, right? People will decide. If they don't want these vehicles, that will be clear. But if we see acceptance of the technology and the benefits are realized through more reliable, safer services, then certainly the objective of a company such as Wave, who is focused on developing the artificial intelligence which powers the driver assistance or self-driving vehicle, would be that we could integrate that into many more vehicle types.
Okay. On safety data, we did touch on that earlier. One of the things that I was conscious of, when I looked at the total, looking at Wave now, like when I looked at the total number of vehicles the total number of miles that your vehicles appear to have driven, the expected number, based on UK road safety data, the expected number of people killed or seriously injured by an average British driver over that number of miles actually was 0 for both. So the fact that you haven't killed or seriously injured anyone is good, but it doesn't allow you to statistically differentiate yourself from another driver. In fact, I think I worked out you could be about 10 times more dangerous than a human driver and you would still have an expected number of 0. So in terms of additional data that you would release to reassure people that actually it is safe, what plans do you have? You mentioned earlier providing information to the regulator and to emergency services, let's say. What other sort of data release plans do you have?
Yeah, so this is actually a really important point. I'm glad we've touched on it. So no developer would build their safety case. And so when I say safety case, that's the body of evidence that you would have to bring to the relevant automotive regulator in the UK. that is a combined authority of the Driver Vehicle Standards Agency and the Vehicle Certification Agency. No developer could drive on road the amount of hours or miles or kilometres that would prove safety. So the big benefit of these vehicles is they are validated through on-road driving, but they are also put through what will be billions of hours of scenarios of on-road driving. So the big reductions we'll see will be proven out in both spheres. So we will have on-road information, but actually the big benefit is you can think of these, sort of think of the brain that's driving the vehicle as a sort of a super intelligent driving function. So we already have driven in 70 countries and across 500 cities. So we have the information from all of that driving, which trains the AI to be able to basically land in a new country and adapt to that driving style based on literally where it is from GPS. And because we've kind of created such an intelligent foundation model that it can pick up new driving styles immediately. So when we bring our safety case to the regulator, it will not be based on we have driven X miles. It will be an incredible amount of hours and data that goes into proving that we are significantly safer than a human driver.
Okay. Ben, I think you have more miles that you've covered. What's the... I should say, particularly, I'm not asking you to give me the PR pitch for how safe you are. Let's take that as read, because you sort of gave that earlier. What I'm interested in is how we can verify that, what data you're publishing to allow us to verify.
Yeah, so at waymo.com/safety, you will find not only a safety dashboard, which is updated regularly, that looks at our mileage, comparisons to peer-reviewed benchmarks of human driving across the same distance and in the same ODD, but also you will find dozens of publications that we have put online that have been submitted to academic journals as well for review that examine safety more broadly than just statistics. So looking at collision avoidance testing, for instance, looking at, to Sarah's point, the contents of a safety case. And so providing the public some reassurance that this is not just looking at, individual KSI stats as you were talking about, but a combination of 12 different methodologies that we will supply to the regulators as part of that safety case. And I think this is a really important point about, we talk a lot about public education and public awareness. As a leader in this technology, we feel a responsibility to share this level of data with the world and invite questions. We've had regulators come to us from around Europe, from around the world, and asking us exactly how these things work, and that's been a conversation we've been really happy to be involved in. I'll leave it there.
Okay, just my final thing then. When we think about the problems always are at the edge, not at the core. So, you might cover 98% of situations fine, and then all the problems exist in the 2%. That's true of human drivers as well, of course. One of the things that exist in that 2% are things like interactions with emergency services. You have a police officer, let's say, flagging down vehicles and, giving them an instruction to stop or pull over or do something that's not normal. How do you think about that with your vehicles? And in particular, how do you think about the two-way communication that you'd normally have? So if I'm driving and a police officer tells me to do something, I can make eye contact, I can gesture, I can do whatever, so the police know that I've seen them and I'm complying. Do you think about that in the design of your vehicles?
Yes. We do. We have, you can have a look at waymo.com/first responders, which is our, it is US based, but it is our program for engaging with law enforcement. Look, we encounter hundreds, thousands of emergency vehicles every day. We put a video online earlier this year which showed us interacting with an emergency, yielding to an emergency vehicle in a crowded London street as well. So as we are testing, we are getting used to these environments. The vehicles are trained to yield to emergency vehicles, and that concept is also covered in legislation. We have trained over 35,000 first responders around the world, so in the US, Japan, and in the UK, on what to do if they encounter our vehicles. And in answer to your question, it basically goes like this. The passenger doesn't have to do anything. The vehicle pulls over to the side of the road, the windows come down, and an acoustic interface in the vehicle means that once we verify that it is a law enforcement officer, that we can engage directly with them. And this is a practice that has been built up over time. And, on our staff, we also have ex-first responders working with us. We have the ex-assistant commissioner of the London Fire Brigade, who was our chief emergency services liaison here in the UK. And so this goes back to my earlier point about this being an iterative process, right? We've been testing this for years. We've been deploying this for many years. And it's that lived experience of having engaged with law enforcement that gives us the confidence as we are coming to London that we can do it here too.
Forgive me, acoustic interface. Does that mean that the police officer is speaking to the car, which is responding with an AI-generated voice, or to
No,
a
to a
human
Waymo
remotely?
representative on the other end of the line.
Okay. Sarah, did you want to add anything on interaction with emergency services?
I'll just say that obviously the vehicles that we're operating this year in London still have a licensed operator, a licensed supervisor at the front of the wheel, so they'll be able to deal with emergency situations, but they'll also be supported by very dynamic and responsive Uber support. So just say that doesn't look like today's Uber support. That looks like a specific AV support that you will get a response to almost instantaneously, and then we expect as we move into full integration to fully driverless service, we will have things like panic buttons, and of course the vehicles will be trained to handle emergency responders or emergency services in the UK. And even though we do have someone still in the driving seat this year, we're already doing a lot of engagement with lots of kind of emergency services, including lots of extensive engagement with the police, looking at lots of different scenarios to get them comfortable with what they're going to be operating with.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jo.
Thank you. Can I just double check? And when you were talking about interactions with emergency services, were you talking about police wanting to interact with the person who's inside the vehicle in the passenger seat?
No, I was talking about a situation where a police officer wants to pull a Waymo vehicle over for whatever reason, and interact with Waymo
driving
directly.
Perspective. What if there is something happening inside the vehicle that is illegal, like county lines or drugs or? Oh, sorry. I have jumped in. I'm very sorry and have leapt ahead because I was so interested in it. Can I bring in Ellie Baker, and you'll get that question later.
Thanks, Chair. We may do. So I'm going to start asking some questions. This section is on transport impacts. And there's been, particularly I'm going to start about traffic and congestion. So there's been some pretty bold claims made about the impact this can, positive impact that autonomous vehicles could have on traffic and congestion. And obviously reducing traffic and congestion is absolutely central to a whole load of bits of the Mayor's transport strategy that are essential for making sure London actually runs. So yes, there are these bold claims, but really on the face of it, adding a new form of transport that is a private car, which could easily be empty a lot of the time, could be circulating in areas of high traffic already, competing with other cars to try and pick up people. That, on the face of it, seems, well, pretty obviously that it would increase congestion. So how would you say that you're going to comply with the Mayor's transport strategy's aims in that area?
Yeah, thank you for that point. Some of these big claims about congestion, I don't think you will have necessarily heard from Waymo. I will say on
Does that mean you think they're untrue and therefore you would introduce increase congestion?
No, what I'm saying is we're still in the early phases of this deployment in various US cities, and I think extrapolating based on what is happening there as to say it will definitely go one way or the other, we are still in the early stages here. In all likelihood, if we were to be given an operating license in London, we would have maybe, our test fleet is just under 100 vehicles at the moment. And if we were given an operating license, I suspect that we would be operating in the low hundreds of vehicles compared to the 120,000 taxi and private hire licensed drivers that there are in London. So it's difficult to extrapolate from that necessarily on what that means. But I think in answer to if I can answer the second part of your question about empty miles, it is not in our interest to do empty miles. It is very expensive for us to run vehicles on the road. we are better off removing vehicles from the road and taking them back to our depots to be charged and cleaned at times of low demand. And so with an autonomous fleet like ours, we can meet demand in a more dynamic way. And that's something that a human-driven PHV fleet cannot as easily do.
But that's not the evidence we have from the US. The US says that actually autonomous vehicles, autonomous passive vehicles spend a large amount of their time travelling without any passengers in them. So why would it be any different in London?
So the data...
I can understand it's in your interest to make that argument, but what I'm trying to work out is whether it's actually true or not.
The vehicle degrades as it is on the road, and the vehicles themselves are expensive cost centers for us. We want to make sure that if they are not serving a passenger trip, that we can maintain them, that we can clean them, that we can get them ready.
How do you get the vehicles in the right place in order to, because you're going to be operating in a market, and the model that you're trying to sell us, because that is what you're trying to do, is putting yourself directly up against other forms of transport in order to be the one that, if this model that you're suggesting is the one that ends up in London, you would have to be on the spot. Your vehicles need to be out there. That's just transport. Do you know what I mean? So you can say lots of things, but this is how your business model would surely work if we get large-scale autonomous vehicles, and that means travelling around without passengers in. So just can you engage with the reality of what? Not tomorrow, not like if you have 200 vehicles, if, as you surely want, large numbers of autonomous vehicles on the streets of London. Because if you're asking for a licence now, or you're asking to be operating now, we're not asking about what is going to happen tomorrow, but what we are letting you do in 6 months, 2 years, 5 years.
So we would obviously love to operate a service across London that can make a meaningful impact on people's lives across the community. Yes. In terms of the numbers of vehicles,
what meaningful impact would that have?
So there are a number of ways. We talked about accessibility.
Please. We're going to come and ask you on accessibility. So if that's, we'll ask you a bit more about that. But if that's something you're saying, okay.
Okay. So accessibility. Again, improving road safety.
We've covered that. Okay.
In recent TfL publications, looking at impediments for people walking and cycling, for instance, road danger is listed as the first bullet that appears on that
Please,
list.
Yeah, so there's no point that, if we've touched on safety a lot, we're going to talk about accessibility. If those are the two areas that you're going to say that you're going to improve, then okay, fine, we've got that.
Sure. I mean, there are plenty more. I mean, we're doing more than 500,000 trips per week in the United States. People love using the service. It's a private space that they have. The Spotify connection works immediately as they get into the car. They can adjust the temperature themselves. And in a city as dynamic as London, being able to have your own space for at least part of that journey is, I think, something that Londoners will welcome.
Right, yeah, I think we'll just have to stop the Waymo advert there, otherwise I suspect the public gallery might get a little bit overexcited. I wonder if I could go to the rest of the panel maybe to ask about congestion.
Yeah, I think that's where our kind of hybrid approach fits in here. So I've met many of you members of the Assembly before on Black Cab. It's something that Free Now pushes very heavily because we have declining Black Cab numbers in London every year. We're losing about 1,000 every year. So that's something that we're already very aware of. Private hire, even though there's 100,000 drivers in London, if you look at our kind of demand metrics on both Black Cab and private hire, we can't satisfy the demand at very kind of different times of day, whether it's early morning, whether it's after festivals, football matches. Even last night after the England game, if you tried to get a Black Cab on our app, you would have struggled. And that's something that we want to kind of fix with this hybrid approach. So we know where the demand is with these vehicles. Ben picked up on it earlier. Utilization is key to the successful commercial rollout of this. We do not want to be driving empty kilometres. We know where that demand is. We still think that the hybrid approach, working with drivers and Black Cab and private hire, augments that. We'll be able to pick up passengers who previously weren't being able to be picked up. We'll have a depot in place as well for the cars to wait in place. charging, etc., cleaning and things like that. I won't repeat what Ben said. So I think that hybrid nature is what's really crucial to us as an operator. We're not a developer, we're an operator.
How would that not be solved by a more effective engagement, because we've criticised on the committee here, TfL having a very regulatory focused approach to taxi and private hire and not really engaging with the transport options and making sure that they're providing the right trips in the right place. Why would that make any difference just because they happen to have no driver?
Sorry, could you say that again?
I just don't understand why the trips that might not currently be, that should be done by, you're saying some trips at the moment could be done by taxi and private hire, but maybe the drivers are in the right place or, they're not driving at that time. I'm saying, why could that not just be managed by better use of taxi and private hire? Why is that going to be solved by a car with no driver?
Well, that's something we already do as an operator. So in advance of any big event, we'll send notifications to our driver base, notifying them that demand's going to be high in this area. We do a lot of driver incentives, so drivers earn more money by completing a few trips in that area or the single level trips. Even with that infrastructure in place, you still don't get the right drivers in place.
Okay.
Be it a kind of religious festival.
That's understood. Sorry, I'm really sorry to be brutal, but I know there's other questions we have to get to, so I'm going to cut to the chase. And I'm just going to cut to the chase of this, which is that does then mean more vehicles on the road, doesn't it, what you're saying? You're saying it could serve a transport purpose, but that transport purpose would mean more vehicles on the road. You're saying it won't cut your private hire and taxi work, but it does mean there'll be more
Actually,
private.
I wanted to pick up on this point in case we don't get it to kind of say it elsewhere, but in San Francisco, which is the most developed kind of market for this in the US, where Waymo have quite a large service, Lyft, our US entity, operate there, and actually the rideshare, which is what they call private hire, was up by 10% in Q4 of 2025. So there's less downtime for drivers, there's more jobs available because it's growing the marketplace.
We will come on to private hire jobs. I promise everyone that we will come on to that. Sarah, I'll come on to you, but I also want to pick up something you said, which is about, I think it was yourself, apologies for somebody else, but that the reason you're focusing on autonomous passenger vehicles is because that's where the demand is. Now, in London, we have lots of ways to get around London. So what is this demand in terms of transport that you're seeing? Because from our point of view as Transport Committee, we see, definitely like in inner London, there are huge options, but obviously the most likely place for you to pick up trips or people you're working with pick up trips would again be inner London, when actually we need journeys to be made in outer London when we don't have options. Is that something you're considering? And if Transport for London came forward and said, we'd like to work with you and say, right, you're only going to work in these areas because we want to effectively commission types of a journey for you or types of transport, is that something that you'd be able to do? You and your partner. Apologies, I know that you.
We are not the operator, so
yes.
I'll give as much detail as possible from our position as the AI developer. I'll talk a little bit about congestion. We've done a huge amount of engagement in the recent months, and we've tried to focus that on kind of a really broad swathe of boroughs in London. So we've held 3 open days and brought people out in roughly 30 demos. And what I would say is, I've kind of come to the conclusion that there's really a tale of two halves when we think about transport provision and people's experience of congestion in London. And it is obvious to everyone that there is congestion in predominantly zones 1 and 2, and it kind of might lessen depending on where you are as you get out further to outer boroughs. But what I'm hearing from most people I speak to is we don't have enough transport provision. So I've actually seen, look, this topic is polarising, but I've seen a lot of excitement for new forms of transportation. And that means that maybe the sort of 2.4 million privately owned vehicles that are still in existence in London and kind of, although there's obviously been rightly sort of moves to try and reduce that number, it has plateaued in recent years. And the realities are people still need vehicles. They still need to be able to take, their kids on trips or take heavy groceries or move furniture around or, just bring their family out for the day that they're struggling to do on public transport. And what I think we're hearing from a lot of people is they're excited about potential impacts in the longer term And I know it's frustrating because we can't sort of promise these things overnight, right? We're not going to get everyone just going, okay, great, we have this self-driving service. I'm going to give up my privately owned car. That's not going to happen overnight. I think these are the types of things you'll see over time. And that's why it's really important that we have an ongoing conversation with all operators and developers with TfL, when they already do, obviously, in kind of traditional services. So I think you'll see that continue. But ultimately, if we don't introduce these new options for people, we won't see any change. And actually, we'll only be reliant on kind of the provision we have at the moment. So I think it's important that we think of congestion in the whole and think about the amount of cars that are parked in London. So the average car is only used 4% of the time. So actually,
I mean, we're familiar with things like that. Before you expand that argument, I'd really just like to challenge it, which is that if autonomous vehicles were to receive, for people to give up cars, they need to be very sure they're going to have another option for a car very, very accessible. We know that through our work for car clubs. The amount of autonomous vehicles you'd have to have around London and circulating around London or parked up in London would have to be huge for people to consider giving up their cars. This is so it comes right back to the congestion. So you're saying, you're basically asking us to say, go with us, we'll fill your streets with autonomous vehicles, and then maybe people will give up their cars. That doesn't seem a very well. There's no real well planned out about what this is actually going to do with London's transport system. And it's a very delicate ecosystem, and a lot of people's jobs rely on it. And you're basically asking us to take a big, big gamble and see where it goes.
So Uber, like Lyft, are planning to operate a hybrid network. So I think that answers your question around where driverless vehicles can fill demand in areas that we're being told are not currently being filled. So again, it's usually a story in an outer borough where I've had feedback that they would really enjoy having another transport service that could be available on demand. And you raise kind of the loss of car clubs. That has been something we've heard from a lot of councils, that they're really interested in schemes that we might be able to run with autonomous vehicles that could replace the loss of car clubs.
Okay. Can I ask one? I'm really sorry, but it's really, really important. Really, really important question.
Everyone.
I know.
We need to be really mindful of every word we say.
I really have been very mindful of every word I've said, I promise you. I think I've outlined some of the concerns that have come to us in terms of how this might impact on London's transport system and the impact on some of the aspects of the Mayor's transport strategy. What would happen if TfL said your model is incompatible with the Mayor's transport strategy and therefore we're not going to grant you a permit to operate? Okay, back to you, Chair.
No, I'm happy to try and answer. Look, we really want to do this the right way. And when it comes to putting automated passenger services on the road in London, there are obviously issues around congestion here, availability of services. We understand that. We have a track record in the US of partnering with public transport as well. We also have partnerships with organizations like VIA, who do demand responsive transport too. What I'd say is that all of these things are on the table. We do recognize that there are challenges here. We want to work with TfL to ensure that in providing more vehicles onto the road, that we can help meet the objectives of the MTS, as you say. The objective is not to just put as many cars on London's roads as possible. We recognize that if TfL does not want us here, and if you don't want us here, then we don't have a business. Right? If we are seen to be congesting London's roads in a way that is not helpful to the city, then we don't have a business. So we really want to do this the right way.
Thank you. Joe.
Yeah, you may have heard from the previous panel that there was some discussion around whether autonomous vehicles would replace public transport options, which is a concern. And one of the issues, or active travel, and one of the issues was that that might make that happen is the costing. So obviously you've all got commercial issues. You obviously want to make profit, but how are you looking at pricing journeys in autonomous vehicles? for example, are you going to be a loss leader and undercutting the private hire industry? Or are you seeking to be at a level which is still maintains public transport as a economical option?
Thanks for the question. I think jumping in on this, the cost of being involved in this industry is huge in terms of the capital investment. At FreeNow and Lyft, Lyft in the US, they own vehicles. FreeNow in Europe, we don't own vehicles. This is our first time going into vehicle ownership. So I think I would separate the idea of profit making from the kind of nascent stages of this. And to answer your question more specifically on pricing, we currently offer various services that I've listed beforehand. We'll be offering this through the kind of private hire or ride feature within our app. So the costing will be comparable.
Okay, is that the same for everybody? Yeah.
Yeah, again, we're not the operator, but Uber's plan is to offer it at the same price point as a human-driven PHV vehicle.
Yes, the same for us. I would say though that there's been some discussion of if the price point is set too high, does that mean that some people do not get to benefit from, do not get to enjoy the benefits of automated vehicles? Again, in the United States, we've run programs where we have offered discounted rides in more disadvantaged areas of the city. We're also part of LA's Youth Mobility Wallet, where people are given a credit card to spend on a variety of transport services, and they can access Waymo through that card. There are all sorts of things that we can do here to make this technology available for more people as well.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just very briefly, just something for you to think about. If your model ends up reducing the number of private hire drivers and those jobs on London's roads, those private hire drivers pay national insurance to national government. They pay rent, they pay their bills, they pay for their food, the stuff that they buy. So do you think that there is capacity within your model to actually make a contribution to government for the loss of national insurance?
That's question 27, employment impact.
Sorry, I was jumping in and actually it's not my day. I am juggling an awful lot of balls here. Keith, ask that question right now.
That's very sweet of you, Caroline. And, you're doing a great job in a very difficult situation. So I appreciate that and understand. Good afternoon, panel. I've been watching. I haven't made much of a contribution so far. This is probably one of the most important questions, really. So the question is, how do you see employment in the taxi and private hire sectors changing in the coming years? And what steps should TfL, the Mayor and Government take to mitigate any negative consequences such as job losses?
I'm happy to jump in on that one first. So I would completely separate the kind of two areas of transport that this is going to impact. Black cab, which is already declining in number, which is a very specific use. We don't see this impacting that. And private hire, where we see this service augmenting the supply so that we can kind of fulfill demand at peak times. If you look at our operation Lyft in the US, we have a kind of subsidiary in Lyft in the US called FlexDrive, which provides a lot of the services surrounding what keeps these vehicles on the road, be it storage, charging, cleaning, maintenance, light maintenance, etc. In the most recent depot we've opened in Nashville, 70 people have been employed there, and over a third of them have come from the kind of local rideshare community. So people who had worked in rideshare who were looking at a different job, quite often they'd worked with Lyft for several years. So, and that kind of statistic works across FlexDrive in the US, where a third of their staff were previously rideshare drivers. So that's something that we're very proud of in the US and want to build on that in the UK. I think to the question, we talked about the next few years. The next few years, we've all made it very clear this is a very, very slow build-up in terms of First of all, going through all the testing. Second of all, going through all the regulatory. Third, bringing people on side. So this is not going to have any material impact on the kind of economic or livelihood of kind of PHV drivers over the next few years. Moving into the 2030s, that's where, you know, we really think that demand is increasing in the city. We augment supply, and we will provide jobs within kind of charging and the infrastructure side of things. So I think it's much further down the line than what people are thinking here. We're talking about tens of vehicles on the road this year, moving to hundreds by the end of the decade.
Yeah, can I come back then? I mean, I think we've seen, even in today's meeting, the passion and the concerns of PHV drivers and probably black cab drivers, as well as the threat that you pose to their jobs. Is there, do you think perhaps that as part of this scheme, that Waymo or whoever else is involved in the scheme should actually contribute to perhaps a fund to help people to retrain or to transition into different employment? I heard what you said about working on the charging points and that, but that won't replace the number of cars that come off the road or number of jobs that potentially could be lost 2030 onwards. So do you think that it would be unreasonable to have some kind of building up some kind of a contingency fund to help fund retraining of current PHV drivers into other industries?
I'd have to defer to government on what they think is the best mechanism to look at the transition of jobs. That's certainly a conversation that we are willing to be a part of. Again, in the United States, we offer training courses at community colleges. We're part of education as part of career coaching as well. These are all things that we're very willing to look at too. I should just add, though, that we've been operating in the US for several years. We have 3,500 vehicles or thereabouts across 11 cities in the US. This is not a change that is going to happen overnight. And again, the objective is not just to put as many vehicles on the roads here as possible. We want to do this in a thoughtful way that makes sense for the community. We also employ hundreds of people in our depots here in London as well, and we expect that number to grow.
Okay, just finally, so what exactly would you say to licensed taxi drivers who are concerned that autonomous vehicles threaten their livelihoods? What would you say to them directly?
Specifically on licensed black cab drivers, I think there's bigger impacts on their industry in terms of the cost of the vehicle and trying to solve that so we can get some financing to help them. The age profile of black cab drivers is increasing. You have something like 2/3 of black cab drivers are over 50. So I think there's much larger threats to that industry, and we at Free Now are working to kind of solve those. So I think on the licensed black cab side, we don't see a major risk to it coming from this.
Okay. Interest of time, Chair, I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thomas, question 19.
Thank you, Chair. And good morning, or afternoon, whatever it is now. How and where will autonomous passenger vehicles park when they're not carrying passengers around London? And do you expect this to affect the availability of parking spaces in London?
So we will have depots and dedicated parking facilities strategically placed around London. We don't want to have lots of those for obvious reasons. Space is difficult to come by, and no, we don't want to take away from public parking spaces.
Again, definitely one for our operator Uber to probably say more on, but no, there's definitely no intention to take up parking spaces. That certainly wouldn't make us any friends in London. We know that.
And I think not much more to add on that point, other than the fact that, because these vehicles follow the rules of the road fully, that they will be parked up in the proper way in places where they can park up, not on double yellow lines, not in bays that are for specific times and permit holders. So they will follow the rules of the road more so than a human driver would.
So some of what we've heard from the existing traders around the fact that drivers know roughly where peak points are. So if they were dropping someone off at City Hall, for example, and knew there was something happening at the O2, they would know to kind of station themselves around the O2. So it's more strategic in their thinking of where they need to be. So can I just clarify what you're saying? That you mean is basically these vehicles would just be going to and from job to depot, drop-off point, back to depot, then back out to the job. There wouldn't be that kind of moving round or trying to anticipate where where demand might fall next.
Yeah, I think it depends on the demand. So if demand is high, these vehicles, to kind of the points we made earlier, utilization is key. They need to be in trip as much as possible. And potentially in those kind of scenarios, they'll be doing the short trip. So what quite often happens in periods of where there's high demand, a lot of drivers won't want to do short trips that takes them away because it's not a big fare. It doesn't really kind of help them commercially. So these vehicles will take the short trips that are unattractive to drivers and be able to operate in that zone of demand. If it's a peak demand after a concert, for example, and then the demand has kind of gone, so O2 across the river is the easiest example from here, and the demand is finished, then they will head back to the depot for charging and maintenance because they've been busy. But for us, from a commercial point of view, it's all about utilization. We've really failed as a business if they're not being used heavily.
In that case, just a final one from me then is actually more on the actual drop-off itself. One thing that's come up through conversations, and actually I know myself, is you put the ping in where you want to go. Sometimes you don't always know the exact address of where you're going, so you just put the street in, and then, or you're meeting someone who's on the move, and you say, "Oh, just drop me off here, please." How would that work with an autonomous vehicle? Would you have to go to the point, the preset destination, and there's no early, no point to get out early?
No early release.
Yeah.
So I think that'll work pretty similar to whatever service people choose to use today. So I think you do need to put in kind of a fairly exact PIN. Even if you don't know the address, you usually sort of like go for the PIN. Sometimes I do that when I don't know where I'm going. Essentially, the driverless vehicle will just go to wherever the customer just points it to, and it will drop them off. Of course, then it will choose kind of a safe area within that location, because it won't obviously just ignore, again, like all road rules, and won't drop them off somewhere that isn't safe.
And just on the pickup side of this, one of the features that we have designed in partnership with the accessibility community in our app is the ability to minimize walking time. So if you're in an area where you can more easily be picked up, you can ensure that the vehicle pulls over to the same side of the road or closer to you than it otherwise would. The trade-off may be a slightly longer ETA, but what we've heard from disability advocates is that even if that is the trade-off, the certainty that they get for their journey planning makes that feature really worth it.
Thank you very much. We have 8 minutes left and 4 questions. Hina, if you can move on with question 20, please just try and be as quick as possible so that we can hear as much evidence.
So my questions are on accessibility. You heard some mixed responses from the last panel, and the black cab industry is the most accessible way of getting around London. How are you going to tackle the things that the black cab industry can do, which is basically give that support to somebody on a wheelchair that your vehicles at the moment won't be able to do? Is that something that you're going to be dealing with? Because I've heard in America they are having vehicles that are allowing wheelchair accessible wheelchair users on these vehicles, but they having a reduced price. Is that right?
Yes, thank you for that. I'm happy to take that one first. So when we originally launched the service in some US cities, there was we didn't, because we don't have a wheelchair accessible vehicle in our fleet. We offered wheelchair users the ability to hail a manual wheelchair accessible vehicle that was manually driven for free. Since then, we have attached a small price to it, but the intention is not to undercut existing services. It is simply so that people can use Waymo to access the help that they need.
So you're saying that you're not going to undercut the black cab industry in the approach that you've got. And I think that's interesting because Steve McManara, who wrote an article in his magazine, London Taxi Driver Association magazine, said he was also thinking that there's not much concern from his perspective because of the approach that Waymo have of a ratio of controllers. He calls them secret handlers. I'm not sure if you would call them that. In San Francisco, where they have a 1-to-1 ratio of people working in the industry. Is that right? Is he right? Has he got an absolute, kind of clear understanding that there is a 1-to-1 ratio? And do these remote controllers, in your position, do you think they will have to have some sort of driving license in place as well?
So I think what he's referring to is the concept of remote assistance, which is dealt with under UK legislation. So these are not remote drivers of the vehicle. They are there to give advice to the vehicle, but it is ultimately the vehicle's decision as to whether or not to accept or reject that advice. Now, the conditions under which this takes place are very tightly controlled. They've been discussed at the United Nations for a very long time, and that will be the practice here. The ratio is not 1-to-1. If it was 1-to-1, then we wouldn't be able to scale this over time. And yes, they go through extensive training and qualification. But I'd just like to stress that they are not performing any driving of the vehicle remotely.
Okay, I'll leave it there because of lack of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bassam?
Thank you. Just stick with that, Ben. So those individuals sitting in wherever they're located, we talked in the previous panel about emergency situations. So you'd be pushing a buzzer to say that something's happened, there's an emergency, I need some assistance in that scenario. Are these the same people that you've just referred to that would be providing that assistance in that scenario?
Yeah, so there are different functions to remotely assist the vehicle, yes, there are emergency. There are people trained in emergencies to.
So there are different people who would be trained specifically to deal with emergency scenarios. Is that right?
Yeah. So depending on the specific incident that's taking place, the incident can be triaged and go to an emergency team. And this is well practiced, and this will have to be something that we can satisfy the regulators that we were able to do effectively.
So it's like press 1 if you're having a heart attack, press 2 if you're... No. So how does it get triaged, sorry, just to be clear?
There is a process that we work through. And again, with doing over 500,000 passenger trips per week, we have a lot of experience dealing with these sorts of scenarios.
Sarah, you wanted to come in or... No. Danny?
I can jump in quickly. The vehicle that we're using also has voice recognition. So in that particular case, from an accessibility point of view, yes, the black cab is the most accessible vehicle for wheelchair, but there's other people with accessibility needs that could be benefited. And I think the voice recognition in the vehicle is definitely a really big positive.
I'll leave it there for now. Thanks.
Can I just follow up on that? You've got cameras inside the cab. What if go for it. You've got cameras inside the cab. If someone is having a heart attack or some kind of medical emergency, how quickly do they recognise that and get assistance? Or do you have that capability?
Yeah, so again, the vehicles will operate this year in London. We'll have someone in the vehicle, so no different to normal operations, but looking forward to fully driverless operation. There will be a support button. Again, I think I mentioned it earlier, it won't look like support today. It will be kind of an instantaneous response. So, as Ben said, there will be remote operation centres. By the way, another big job creation kind of avenue in the UK will be all of this handling that happens along the whole kind of fleet maintenance and remote assistance to ensure that people can be responded to in emergency situations. And the vehicles are most likely to have a kind of an SOS emergency button.
Are you confident that your cameras would pick up the difference between someone who is asleep and someone who has collapsed?
So
I'm just, this is really serious safety of people travelling in autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, so if someone was unresponsive, the customer service kind of agents that would be basically on the other side of that button would obviously have training to help them make that decision. And a lot of that will be around whether the person is responsive or not. Like, has the trip ended and the person's still not responsive, then I think there would be rightly a concern that they weren't okay, and then there would be someone who would be able to interact with that person. If again they are non-responsive, then that's when you would likely triage it into an emergency situation.
Okay, Ellie, do you want to do your?
Yeah, thanks. This is sort of in the same area, but I'm going to ask about instances of assault in autonomous vehicles, and particularly thinking about circumstances where we might be creating spaces where violence against women and girls could take place. I mean, unspoken that a lot of sort of cab trips take place after late at night, sometimes with people who don't know each other very well. Having a driver in there provides a automatic check on some behaviour, if not all. Have you collected data on instances of assault in your vehicles, and will you be doing that? And what measures are you putting in place so that these sort of things, that there isn't an increased risk in the sort of vehicles that you want to operate?
I don't have data for you to share with you today on specifically on assaults. We do look at instances of any sort of dangerous behaviour in our vehicles. What I can tell you is that between 54 and 61% of female riders in our vehicles have reported that they feel safer in a Waymo than they do in a human-driven vehicle.
I want hard data about what's happening rather than the perception is important. It really, really is. I'm not doubting that. What I'm asking about is what actually happens and whether you're tracking that and what happens if it does.
Sure. So in response to the latter part of your question, as similar to what Sarah outlined, there is a check that happens at the start and at the end of a journey to make sure of what's happening. And then during the journey, if for instance, a seatbelt is undone and there is movement in the cabin, we can detect what is going on. And somebody will beam into the car and ask if everybody's okay. If they can see that something is not happening well, we can contact emergency services and the vehicle will pull over safely to the side of the road. This is also, just to give you a more mundane example, this has happened when I've been in a Waymo vehicle. I've had a suitcase next to me. It was rattling around on the seat next to me, and I'm just giving you a basic example. I don't really think
that's an appropriate example when I'm talking about somebody being assaulted in the back of a cab, to be perfectly honest, because what you're saying does not replace what a human in the front would be able to pick up on in terms of uncomfortable interactions in the back that didn't involve any major movement or seatbelts being undone or anything like that. So, I'm not hearing, obviously I haven't heard it, but I'm not hearing the level of concern about how serious this is at this stage. Apologies, I can see Chair boring her eyes into me.
Well, could I just quickly say, there will be cameras in the vehicle and the vehicle is covered in cameras. If someone was to choose to commit a crime in that specific space versus another space, that would, you would have a lot of information. And I also have to second the point that a lot of women are excited about the fact that they won't have to travel home with a man in the front seat late at night.
Also, just a reminder, all taxi drivers are fully, taxi and private hire drivers are fully DBS checked. Thank you very much. We'll have none of that here. Back to you.
Yes, I think we have reached 1 o'clock. So thank you, everyone. Sorry. Can you cope with another 5-6 minutes? Go for it, Jo.
Thank you. I was going to ask about privacy. And should Londoners be worried about their personal data being captured and analysed for commercial purposes by you?
I can take that one first.
Yeah.
As the operator of the service, we've built our own tech in order to ingest the data from these vehicles. So the vehicles are incredibly smart. We've talked about the sensors, we've talked about the data collection. That is uploaded to a secure server that we have kind of built the technology for, that is obviously GDPR compliant. sits in Europe and is owned by us as the operator. In terms of going to the developer, only things to do with the vehicle kind of diagnostics, vehicle improvement and stuff like that goes to it. So everything like license plates will be masked, people's faces will be blurred, so people's personal data will not even be collected in that way, nor will it be shared. We also, between the kind of different types of data that we collect, it'll be deleted within 3 to 7 days, depending on the type of data. And obviously within the kind of GDPR and kind of wider data protection rules, people can request the data to be deleted at any point that they choose.
Is that the same for all, or are you planning to store it for any longer and perhaps sell it on?
No plans to sell. We are very much in the business of building the technology to drive the vehicle. Selling the data isn't in our business plan. We've actually been asked to make sure we have appropriate coverage within the vehicle, pointing to the previous topic of ensuring safety and ensuring that we have proper recourse if something did occur inside the vehicle. Obviously, all operations in the UK are subject to strict data protection regulation. And pointing back at the kind of the first topic I think we talked about on safety, even the information that is stored for kind of specific regulatory reasons will only be there and available to share with the regulator when it's requested. Essentially, it's not something that would be shared widely.
Ben?
Yes, same answer for me.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is around cyber attacks. I suppose, what precautions are you taking to make sure that your vehicles cannot be used to disrupt for perhaps a terrorist attack or so forth? Has that factored into your testing so far?
Yeah, so we build our software to be automotive grade. So all software that goes into a vehicle today has to meet very stringent cybersecurity regulations. Those are, again, set at the UN level. So we follow that best practice that is very similar to any cyber physical infrastructure. And we have, a very long-standing security team who think about how to integrate that both in our test fleet today and as we integrate into vehicles. But I can just say the automotive industry is already subject to the highest cybersecurity regulations, and we will have to prove that, and is an integral part of our safety case when we go to seek approval for a fully driverless operation.
Thank you. Is there anything to add?
Just building on Sarah's answer, UN regulations 155 on cybersecurity and 156 on software updates have been hard built into the UK framework. And in order for us to receive any sort of approval, then we would need to be in full compliance with that regulation.
Thank you. Finally, there has been concern that some foreign powers might be able to use the vehicles. We had, I think, in our first section, these vehicles travelling around, perhaps past sensitive sites and so forth. Some of you are foreign-owned. Is that an issue that we should be worried about at all?
I can jump in on this one first. So, the vehicle that we're working with has to go through all DFSA checks, IVA checks, all those kind of things to be entered into the country in the first place. We have at Lyft a kind of 4-pillar policy of working with partners. So we work with various different partners in the US. We work with Waymo in the US. We're working with Baidu in the UK. Baidu are a kind of publicly traded entity in China. And we've gone through a very stringent kind of security check with them before kind of launching into this partnership.
Okay.
I just add that our vehicles are end-to-end encrypted, and we don't have the capability for them to be, remotely driven. We've never had a hacking incident take place. And again, the steps that we need to go through to get approved are incredibly rigorous.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm all sorts of imaginations of terrible things, and I'm not going to start vocalising them. I just want to thank all the guests and also all the members on the committee for getting through the meeting, and thank you for your responses today. If you could just remain seated for a few moments while we just finish off our remaining business. We may also send you a few additional questions in writing, because we've jumped around our questions a bit, and I think we may have left out 1 or 2 things that we were intending to ask you. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to me as chair in consultation with party group lead members to agree any output arising from the meeting? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note the work programme, authorise the chief officer or the person they delegate authority to engage an external recruitment agency to support the Assembly with the forthcoming London Travel Watch board recruitment exercise up to a maximum value of £50 and make £50,000 and make necessary arrangements and associated decisions up to the final stage of recruitment, where shortlisted candidates will be interviewed and appointment decisions made in liaison with Transport Committee party group lead members. Thank you. The next meeting of the committee is scheduled for the 14th of July at 10 a.m. in the chamber at City Hall. There is no urgent business, so thank you. The meeting is now closed. Thank you very much.
Please stand by.